Even stuck in the darkest ditches where no one bothers to look, a star remains a star. Blood splatters and weapons clash violently against the freezing winter snow. A fierce warrior with a determined gaze stands ready to unleash a powerful strike. He refuses to let his inner light fade, keeping the hope of a star alive in his heart. The overwhelming scent of fresh blood mixes with the biting cold air of the city streets. A sharp sword stands outlined against the endless night sky as a young man holds it close. Vlad stares at the blade in awe, noting how incredibly cool it looks no matter how many times he sees it. Zemina walks into the room and immediately calls out to Vlad, pointing out that he has been completely out of it lately. Vlad fires back, telling her not to get on his nerves during one of his rare breaks. But Zemina warns him that people are already gossiping. When Vlad asks what she means, Zemina inquires if he still hears strange voices whenever he picks up a stick. She wonders what past sins he committed to get struck by literal black lightning on an otherwise perfectly clear day. Zemina tells him to stay hidden in the shop because the ruthless new bishop used to be a heresy inquisitor who burned suspects at the stake. Vlad groans in frustration, but she reminds him that too many locals saw the lightning strike and the church might drag him away. She urges him to just buy the sword instead of overthinking, but Vlad hesitates because the price is simply too high. Vlad can barely believe his eyes when he realizes the seller wants 5 gold coins for what he calls a stupid chunk of metal. The old blacksmith rages at the insult, yelling that a high-quality sword is not meant for low-life street punks. Vlad counters that only slum dwellers would ever buy from a shop in the slums, asking the old man if he has lost his mind. The blacksmith demands some respect, but Zemina asks why he is causing a scene making swords that only noble knights use. The old man fires back that his time on Earth is almost over, causing Zemina to snap in anger before Vlad tries to pull her away. Vlad tells the old man they are leaving as the blacksmith grumbles about Zemina being a venomous brat. The old man recalls giving her plenty of food in the past, swearing under his breath as they walk away in the snow. He notices deep indents in the dirt, realizing Vlad must have been standing there practicing for a very long time. He wishes the kid would focus on making ends meet instead of harboring useless dreams in a miserable place like this. The blacksmith firmly resolves to sell his masterpiece to someone who can actually escape the slums rather than letting it rot. The magnificent blade gleams under the light as Vlad and Zemina stand together with determined expressions. The city of Asura stands as the brilliant economic heart of the north, but such bright light always casts incredibly deep shadows. The sprawling slums serve as a dumping ground for the city's dirtiest and most forgotten secrets. A massive roar echoes through the wooden alleys as an angry customer screams that he is being scammed with fake medicine. The muscular brute demands to see the madam, shouting that the business is a complete sham. Vlad watches the commotion build, his blue eyes narrowing as he prepares to step in. Vlad mockingly asks the brute how much fun he expected to have in a mere 5-minute session anyway, telling him to go home if he is broke. The customer fumes in rage, but Vlad calmly points to the grandfather clock and proposes a wager. He declares that if the candle does not burn for a full 5 minutes, the man can do whatever he wants to the hostess. The brute hesitates to trust the scammer, but Vlad locks eyes with him and promises to beat him to a pulp if the candle lasts. The brute flinches at the sheer intensity of Vlad's piercing blue eyes, feeling a sudden wave of dread. Vlad stands tall in the dim tavern, demanding to know who the real scammer is as the brute grits his teeth. The candle sits quietly on the wooden table, slowly emitting a thin trail of smoke. The brute panics as he checks the clock, realizing the 5 minutes have officially passed. With a fierce war cry, the brute lunges forward to attack, but Vlad is already moving. Vlad dodges the clumsy strike, coldly telling the man that his 5 minutes are up. Vlad delivers a punishing blow that sends the heavy mercenary crashing hard onto the floorboards. The brute shrieks in terror as Vlad stands over him, calling him the actual scammer. Vlad lunges with blinding speed, mocking the heavy brute for calling himself a mercenary and threatening his family. Bone. Shattering impacts echo through the street as Vlad ruthlessly throws the scammer out into the dirt. Vlad looks down at the mess, realizing someone must have actually tampered with the candle timers. Vlad looks up to see Jorge, telling the boss that someone definitely messed with their inventory. Jorge silently eats his meal as a pale, dark-haired employee demands to know who would dare touch their precious candles. Vlad sighs that they will have to search for the culprit, but the pale worker suddenly reveals that they already found them. Vlad looks on in shock as Marcella steps forward with a mischievous smile, admitting she was the one who played the prank. She confesses she just wanted to scam some extra gold off the drunkards, leaving Vlad to realize he beat the man up for no reason. Vlad heads down the stairs with a sigh, met by a smug colleague who praises him for a job well done while the boss was away. The thug Burley corners Vlad, demanding the tip money he made from yesterday's candle sales. Burley tells Vlad not to look so scary, promising a fair trade in exchange for the silver. He reveals a captured, trembling young pickpocket named Ned, asking Vlad if he recognizes the kid. Burley offers to sell the kid back unharmed for 40 silver, noting that it is an incredibly generous deal. Vlad coldly tells the gang members to just kill the thieves next time, instead of coming to find him. Burley laughs it off, claiming they are simple gang members rather than murderers, confident Vlad will take the deal. Ned kneels on the ground in tears, looking up at Vlad with pleading eyes. Vlad glares at the gang, telling them to get out of his sight immediately before he starts breaking bones. The thugs retreat with the silver, leaving Vlad to sigh over losing his hard-earned savings. Down at the bustling harbor, a hand carefully records notes on a wooden desk. A colleague mentions that the pickpocket was lucky to escape with his fingers and ankles intact. The conversation shifts to the tampered candles, with the crew agreeing that Marcella is not the type to do such things without a serious motive. Vlad agrees that Jorge and Marcella must have had a desperate reason, wondering what could drive them to it. His companion warns him that there is a 90% chance they urgently need funding to prepare for an impending war. A brutal turf war is brewing among the 5 dominant bosses who control the dark underbelly of Sawara. The legendary former knight, Jorge, stands ready to defend his territory against his ruthless rivals. The tension in the air grows thick as the slums brace for a massive collision of steel and magic. A group of armed men suddenly confront Vlad, demandingly asking where his boss is hiding. Vlad stares back in silence, his sharp blue eyes assessing the immediate danger. Vlad realizes that the infamous boss Moneybug has arrived in person, signaling that the preparations for war are already complete. A hostile thug steps forward, shouting at Vlad to answer the boss's question and reveal where Jorge is. Vlad shrugs and claims he is just a lowly candle seller, prompting the angry thug to bark a threat. Blades clash instantly as a violent skirmish erupts, wood splinters flying through the air. Expensive candles shatter across the floor as a group of men watch the confrontation unfold from their seats. A thug steps on the broken merchandise, prompting Vlad to look up and tell him to get his feet away. Vlad repeats his warning with chilling calm, driving the thug to swing his weapon in a furious rage. Vlad unleashes a series of rapid, fluid strikes, treating the single fight as a microcosm of the war to come. With a sharp twist of his body, Vlad outmaneuvers his opponent and delivers a crushing blow that leaves the thug gasping. A massive shockwave ripples through the room as Vlad's swift, decisive actions completely dominate the battlefield. Standing amidst the wreckage with a simple wooden training sword, Vlad looks down at his defeated opponent. The remaining thugs draw their weapons, hesitant, but ready to swarm the young fighter. The infamous one-armed Jack steps forward, holding his arm and laughing as Vlad calmly states he does not discriminate against the disabled. Jack roars with laughter at the kid's sheer audacity, proposing they have a private chat later. Jack asks which local bum he took out earlier, and Vlad retorts that they must have died early if Jack cannot even remember them. Jorge suddenly enters the room in full armor, loudly offering to grill up some meat for his esteemed guest. Jorge suggests moving their conversation upstairs, while Jack casually asks if he has any high-quality liquor instead of meat. Jorge agrees to the tasting, as Jack gives Vlad a menacing, lingering look before heading up. Vlad breathes a heavy sigh of relief, looking down at the wooden box full of broken weapons. His colleague laughs and tells Vlad that the boss had nothing but praise for him, offering him a job once he tires of the candle shop. Vlad declines, stating the current shop feeds and pays him well. But a heavy hand suddenly drops a glittering gold coin onto the table. Vlad stares at the gold coin in absolute shock, as Jack tells him he can have as many as he wants if he comes to work for him. Jack announces his departure, leaving the tavern in high spirits, while Jorge calls out for Vlad. Zamina runs over to Vlad, urgently letting him know that the boss is summoning him immediately. Vlad enters the quiet room where Jorge presents him with a beautiful, real sword, telling him to keep it on his person at all times. Jorge explains that the circumstances require him to pass the weapon over much earlier than planned. Vlad can tell from the heavy tension in the room that the meeting between Jorge and one-armed Jack went terribly wrong. He realizes that the peace in the slums has officially shattered, and a catastrophic clash is inevitable. Jorge grimly admits that the opposing side has brought in skilled mercenaries, leaving them at a massive disadvantage. Even a legendary knight like Jorge will struggle against the overwhelming numbers and elite swordsmen Jack has assembled. Jorge looks at Vlad and tells him that is exactly why they need him, promising to assign him his very first official mission soon. A book lay open on a desk, representing the power of learning and effort that allows even the lowest to rise to higher places. Vlad practices alone in the courtyard, grumbling as a mysterious voice in his head instructs him to narrow the angle of his elbow during a swing. Ever since he was struck by jet black lightning a month ago, these strange demonic whispers have plagued his mind whenever he holds a blade. Though he tries his best to ignore the voice to keep it from clinging onto him, the whispers persist. Vlad focuses his mind and strength, lifting his sword and preparing to execute a precise strike. As he follows the voice's instruction, a massive blast of blue magical energy erupts from his sword, cleaving the air with explosive power. Vlad stands in awe of the sheer destruction, realizing his raw swings are completely different now. Vlad clutches his head, utterly terrified of the mysterious power that has made its way into his mind. Under the cold light of a full moon, blood-stained cloth falls onto the freezing mountain snow. A seasoned warrior stands in the freezing winter air, noting that the cold penetrates deep into his bones. He calls out into the silent, snowy forest, telling whoever is hiding to step forward. Vlad emerges from the trees, and the warrior introduces himself as Stanga, realizing Vlad is the guide from the slums. Stanga remarks that Vlad's blonde hair and blue eyes make him look more like a noble than a slum dweller, as Vlad hands him a sealed letter from Jorge. Stanga reads the letter and realizes the opposing gang has hired a former knight as a mercenary, understanding why Jorge requested his aid. Vlad confidently states he will guide him safely, estimating they will arrive in 2 days under the cover of night. When Stanga questions his competence, Vlad insists he is perfectly capable, but the old knight tells him to just shut up and keep up. Vlad glares with intense determination, and Stanga is mildly surprised by the young man's sharp, fearless look. Stanga smiles to himself, finally realizing why Jorge is so fond of the kid and considers him worthy of being nurtured. The two sit around a crackling campfire deep in a snowy cavern, seeking warmth from the freezing night. Stanga asks Vlad why he keeps staring, wondering if it is his very first time seeing a retired knight up close. Vlad admits it is, prompting Stanga to ask where he comes from, with Vlad replying that he is from Dikia. Stanga eyes Vlad's fresh beef jerky hungrily, offering to trade answers to Vlad's questions in exchange for a share. Stanga licks his lips at the delicious scent of the jerky, urging the kid to make the trade. Stanga reiterates his offer to answer one question for one piece of jerky, and Vlad hands him the entire bag, telling him to take as many as he wants. Stanga notes that knights must always give something in exchange for what they receive, but Vlad reminds him that he is retired. Vlad looks up and asks Stanga if he knows how to wield aura, noting that not all knights possess the ability. Stanga smirks, realizing Vlad is far sharper than he appears on the outside, and accepts the challenge to show him. Stanga draws his blade, repeating that a knight must always give back in equal measure for what they take. Vlad asks why Stanga is closing his left eye, and the knight explains he must visualize his inner world from deep within his soul. Stanga leaps into the air as brilliant blue particles of magical energy begin to swirl rapidly around his blade. Stanga tells Vlad to watch closely, declaring that this energy is the true essence of what makes a knight. With an explosive roar, Stanga unleashes a blinding, majestic wave of blue aura that lights up the entire night sky. Having successfully slipped past the main castle walls, Stanga grumbles about having to crawl through a dirty hole like a hobo. Stanga complains that his pride as a knight is wounded, but Vlad reminds him that looking like a dirty hobo is much safer right now. Vlad explains they had to use the secret passage to avoid detection, promising a warm bath as they enter the eerie, silent streets. Stanga steps on a snapping twig, stopping in his tracks as he grimly asks Vlad if the city is always this unsettlingly quiet. Vlad's heart sinks into his chest as he gazes upon the fresh blood and heavy wreckage littering the quiet stone alleyways. Realizing an ambush has already taken place, Vlad explains the secret backdoor route to his companion before they split up to divide the enemy's attention. Vlad sprints through the shadows, passing a shattered, blood-splattered archway that leads into the compound. Gasping for breath, Vlad slips through the ruins and finally locates his allies safe inside. An exhausted Jorge explains that the money leech struck their compound first, forcing him into a brutal battle against an elite opponent. Vlad assures his battered boss that the escort target arrived safely and should be entering through the back door shortly. Jorge grimly declares that they will launch a counterattack tomorrow to end the war once and for all, asking Vlad how the mercenary behaved. Vlad reassures him that the man is a reliable ally who can even channel aura through his blade. Vlad smiles as he senses the knight's arrival, but Jorge's face instantly pales with sheer terror. Jorge desperately pulls Vlad behind him, revealing the terrifying truth that the real Stanga never knew how to use aura. The fake Stanga steps into the room with a chilling smile, mocking them for running so far from home. The silver-haired intruder chuckles, remarks that the freezing winter wind must have gotten to Jorge's old bones. He stares down at the bloody floor, mocking Jorge's desperate struggle to defend his weak position. He asks Jorge if he is simply a fool or acting stupid on purpose, noting how much the old deserter has changed over the years. The intruder reveals that Count Gaidar has passed away, a massive secret that will soon shake the entire region. He raises a glass in mock celebration, raising a toast to the pitiful memory of the late Count Gaidar. Jorge roars in absolute fury, drawing his sword and lunging at the silver-haired killer with a powerful strike. Blades clash with deafening force as the two powerful warriors trade lightning-fast blows in the dark room. The intruder smiles as he blocks, raising a toast to the brand-new Count Gaidar, Sigmund. Sigmund unleashes a barrage of crushing strikes, completely overwhelming Jorge's defenses in a flurry of sparks. Sigmund demands that the deserter knight return immediately to face his judgment, declaring this as the new Count's first official decree. A heavily bloodied Jorge struggles to his feet as Sigmund notes that the Count never expected him to return quietly. Sigmund delivers a devastating blow that sends Jorge crashing violently through the wooden walls. Vlad desperately screams for Marcella to flee the collapsing building as the battle tears the tavern apart. Dust and debris rain down on the alleyways as Vlad scrambles through the falling wreckage. Vlad spots Burley in the chaos and yells at him to gather all their men to save Jorge. With his blue eyes burning, Vlad charges directly at Sigmund with his sword held high. Sigmund effortlessly parries the strike, mocking Jorge for making incredibly naive choices to protect a gutter kid. Another massive impact shakes the street, sending the surrounding gang members fleeing in absolute terror. Jorge coughs up a thick spray of blood, his strength completely spent as Sigmund stands victoriously over him. Vlad refuses to back down, executing a rapid-fire sequence of slashes to force the killer away from his mentor. Vlad screams for Jorge to get out of the way as his blade collides with Sigmund's heavy steel. Jorge collapses to his knees, while Sigmund unleashes a powerful shockwave that sends Vlad flying backward. Sigmund walks forward calmly, asking Jorge why he didn't simply follow orders and obey his masters. Spitting blood onto the dirt, Jorge defiantly replies that he is a human being who refused to follow dogshit orders. Sigmund steps on Jorge's chest, his purple eyes narrowing as he prepares to deliver the final strike. He quietly mutters that the night has dragged on for far too long, and it is time for them to rest. With a sudden twist of his wrist, Sigmund unleashes a blinding pillar of blue magical energy that vaporizes the courtyard. Vlad screams in absolute agony, charging through the blinding light to stop the slaughter. Vlad's body crackles with raw, blue electrical energy as he swings his sword with frantic, desperate power. Steel grates against steel in a rapid-fire clash of energy, the shockwaves blowing back the onlookers. Despite his ferocious efforts, Vlad's sword is violently shattered into pieces by Sigmund's overwhelming counter. Vlad falls heavily onto the frozen ground, staring in utter shock at his broken weapon. A massive dark pillar of energy descends onto the compound, completely obliterating what remains of their home. Vlad kneels in the burning debris, weeping as a massive pool of blood spreads across the snow. Jorge was the very first person to reach out and acknowledge a dirty gutter kid rolling in the back alley dirt. Now, the approaching moonlight of Count Gaidar has wretchedly shattered the young boy's entire world into pieces. Vlad grabs a discarded blade, screaming at Sigmund to stop as he charges with suicidal fury. Sigmund easily parries the frantic attack, suddenly realizing the boy is channeling a genuine sword path. He marvels at how a mere slum kid could possess such instinctual talent, finding it highly impressive. Vlad screams in rage as he lunges again, but Sigmund slides beneath the strike and delivers a deep slash to Vlad's shoulder. Sigmund notes that Vlad instinctively twisted his body to deflect what should have been a fatal blow. He decides that killing such a promising young prospect right now would be a waste, promising to return when Vlad has a sharper sword. Vlad lies gasping and bloodied on the snow as Sigmund sheathes his weapon to leave. Sigmund admits his name isn't Stanga and throws a small bag back to Vlad, claiming he will only take what is a fitting price for his victory. Vlad crawls through the freezing slush, weakly whispering that he will eventually kill Sigmund for this. Sigmund scoffs at the threat, leaving the broken young boy to scream his hatred into the empty night sky. Vlad's agonizing screams echo through the burning ruins as his world completely falls apart. Sometime later, Zemina desperately pulls a severely battered Vlad through the dark, snowy streets. She begs him to get up, angrily asking if he wants to die in the freezing dirt. Vlad weakly struggles to move his broken body as Zemina urges him to keep his wits about him. She asks him if he knows the difference between the rich folks in the center of town and slum losers like them. She explains that the wealthy can fail and get back up, but for slum dwellers, a single failure means certain death. She begs him not to waste his once-in-a-lifetime chance to survive as she supports his weight. Zemina asks if she needs to slow down, but Vlad grits his teeth and tells her to keep moving. Vlad declares that he refused to let his story end here, even though their home has been completely destroyed. Though they are nothing but young birds, it is finally time for them to soar into the sky on their own. Shouts echo through the streets as rival gang members search every alleyway to find and execute Vlad. A scarred thug vows to make Vlad pay for the humiliation he suffered earlier, ordering his men to split up. Zemina and Vlad slip into the old blacksmith's workshop, desperately trying to bypass the patrols. Vlad tells Zemina that they cannot escape together at this rate, urging her to leave him and save herself. Zemina tearfully refuses, reminding Vlad that he promised Marcella he would help her reach a safe location. Vlad snaps at her to go to the convent or find Harvin before sunrise, asking how she expects him to protect her in his current state. The old blacksmith suddenly enters the room, demanding to know who has broken into his shop so late. Zemina suddenly draws a knife and leaps at the old man, startling everyone in the room. The blacksmith demands to know what they are doing, but Zemina holds her ground and tells him not to move. The old man sighs, telling her he understands their desperate situation and asking her to put the weapon down. Instead, Zemina points her knife at the wall and aggressively demands that he hand over the 5 gold masterwork sword. The blacksmith is stunned, but Zemina screams that it is not safe outside the city and she needs the weapon to save Vlad. The old man looks at her desperate face, reflecting on the harsh reality of the slums where people must steal to survive. He notes with a sad smile that it is finally her turn to face this brutal world. Vlad weakly calls out Zemina's name as she prepares to fight the old man for the blade. Zemina lunges forward, her eyes filled with tears as she desperately pleads for the weapon. She makes a solemn oath to return the weapon, begging the blacksmith to give them a chance. The old man stares at the weeping girl in silence before looking over at the broken, blonde-haired boy. The blacksmith realizes that this kid is destined to achieve the one dream he could never fulfill in his entire life. With a heavy sigh, the old man tells them they are making things incredibly hard for him before ordering them to follow him. Under the cover of darkness, the blacksmith hides the teenagers inside a smelly trash cart and pushes them through the snow. A rival gang patrol stops the old man, demanding to know why he is throwing out trash at such a late hour. The blacksmith furiously rages at them, cursing them for blocking all the alleyways with their stupid street fights. He claims he had to hire a young helper with bread because he was too tired to haul the cart alone. A suspicious thug draws his glowing blue sword, ordering them not to move unless they want to lose a limb. The old man gasps in shock as the thug aggressively inspects the cart. Another thug grumbles about how hard it is to make a living, asking if they have found any sign of Jorge's blonde kid. The blacksmith demands to know if they can finally leave, but the lead thug orders his lackey to check the wagon just to be safe. The tension grows unbearable as the thug walks over to the wagon with his sword drawn. Vlad hides silently in the dark interior, praying they will not be discovered. The thug Otar suddenly stops his partner, stating that checking the cart isn't necessary. He stares directly at the hidden Vlad, quietly whispering that this is his job, but he won't interfere. Otar mentions that Harvin has placed a boat down by the river and that everyone else fled in that direction. Otar tells the old man to move along, stating that this favor fully settles the 40 silver debt his brother Ned owed Vlad. Vlad rests his head on his arms inside the cart, whispering his silent gratitude to Otar as they finally escape the slum cordon. The cart safely passes the outer stone fortress, and Zamina tearfully whispers a final goodbye to Vlad, praying he will be okay. Vlad holds the masterwork sword in his hand, a weapon forged from an old man's dreams and bought with a young girl's tears. Under the glowing blue light of the moon, Vlad escapes into the vast, snowy mountain wilderness. Alone in the freezing mountain peaks, Vlad draws the beautiful masterwork sword. He looks down at the blade and speaks into the silence, asking the voice in his head if it can hear him. The voice responds, promising to help Vlad regain his lost memories if Vlad agrees to become its sword. Vlad declares he doesn't care if the voice is the devil itself, because he is far more terrified of being absolutely nothing. The voice agrees to the pact, preparing to teach him the true secrets of the sword. High in the bright snowy mountains, a massive military encampment sits nestled in the forest. The calculating Joseph Bayezid sits at a chessboard, muttering that his current campaign is simply too easy. His elite warrior Jaeger returns to the tent, announcing his arrival to the young master. Jaeger asks if something is troubling Joseph, noting his serious demeanor. Joseph explains that the monster's subjugation has gone far too smoothly with minimal casualties, meaning his forces are unchallenged. He worries that without any real chaos or variables, his cruel father and his half-brother Rudiger will maintain total control. Joseph grinds his teeth, realizing he will be utterly destroyed if he fails to secure the position of Count. He sighs that aside from Jaeger, he completely lacks powerful swordsmen to back his claim. Jaeger stands tall, reporting that he has just received an incredibly unusual piece of information regarding the slums. Jaeger presents a highly unusual report to Joseph Bayezid, pointing out a suspicious soldier whose recent combat records do not match up. Joseph closely inspects a slain monster's corpse, noting that the crude, clumsy slashes look like the work of a child who has only just begun wielding a sword. Jaeger directs his attention to several other bodies, showing that while the tactical habits are identical, some of the cuts are significantly cleaner. Joseph's eyes widen in sheer disbelief as he compares the distinct combat traces, realizing they all carry the exact same signature. Jaeger confirms his suspicions, explaining that the cruder marks were left a month ago, while the perfect deep cuts were delivered just yesterday. Joseph mutters that such rapid growth is practically impossible, demanding to know the true identity of this mysterious soldier. High in the freezing, snow-covered mountains, a vicious pack of monsters suddenly ambushes the Imperial vanguard. Vlad executes a series of dazzling, lightning-fast slashes to push back the beasts, as the soldiers desperately struggle to tighten their formation. Vlad stands calmly amidst the falling snow, holding his blade low as his awestruck companions prepare to finish off the remaining monsters. Before they can celebrate, a massive, muscular elite beast bursts from the thick tree line, catching the squad completely off guard. The colossal monster roars in fury, its deafening cry echoing through the snowy valley as the frontline soldiers panic. The beast easily smashes through their defensive line, leaving the heavily armored mercenaries scrambling backward in terror. The squad leader screams for everyone to fall back as the monster completely obliterates Group 5. A cowardly veteran refuses to advance, leading a brave young soldier to draw his weapon and charge into the fray alone. The colossal beast roars as it lunges at the incoming fighter with bone-crushing force. Vlad steps into the deep snow, his sharp gaze locking onto the rampaging monster as his allies watch in stunned silence. Identifying himself as the mercenary Ryman, Vlad calmly declares that he will take on the massive beast himself. With a sudden burst of speed, Vlad darts forward, his blade humming with raw power as the monster snarls in irritation. The beast swings its heavy arm, but Vlad easily slips beneath the strike, delivering a fluid, agonizing cut across its chest. The monster roars in pain as Vlad leaps back, his blue eyes focused on completing his form. Despite his successful strike, Vlad lands with a sigh, grumbling that he failed to execute the movement perfectly. The furious monster lunges again, but Vlad pivots with incredible grace, driving his sword forward with visceral, rapid-fire speed. A massive shockwave of snow and dirt erupts as Vlad's blade deeply carves through the monster's thick hide. The heavy beast crashes face first into the freezing slush, completely defeated by the young mercenary's overwhelming power. Vlad quietly sheathes his weapon, his mind entirely focused on refining the mysterious sword path. Joseph Bayezid watches the spectacular display from the cliffs, whispering the name Riemann with deep intrigue. Joseph turns to Jaeger, ordering him to investigate this highly unusual young swordsman immediately. Back at the camp, a starry-eyed mercenary praises Vlad for his incredible performance, but Vlad coldly tells him to focus on loading their kills. His companion asks what he plans to do next, pointing out that his forged mercenary plaque will eventually get him caught. The mercenary offers to introduce Vlad to a skilled blacksmith who can forge a real plaque, but Vlad sharply warns him to shut his mouth. Vlad glares intensely, stating that if the advice is a threat, he will kill him, leaving the chatty mercenary trembling in fear. Vlad tells him to get back to work, secretly resolving to do something about his loose-lipped comrade very soon. The next morning, the mercenaries watch in awe as Vlad heads off into the quiet, snowy woods to practice his swordplay. Vlad executes a series of powerful, elegant strikes, prompting his companions to whisper that he must be a disguised noble. Vlad sighs in frustration, realizing he still cannot cut through a thick tree trunk with a single clean blow. The demonic voice in his head mockingly calls him a fool, telling him to strike with a decisive wham when the opponent moves. Vlad walks back to the bustling camp under a bright blue sky, the smell of warm soup filling the crisp winter air. The mercenaries happily dig into their free meals, praising the wealthy Bayezid family for providing food in such a desolate place. They notice Vlad heading toward the priest's tent, wondering if they should start praying to get on the captain's good side. A beautiful blue-robed shrine stands in the snow, where Father Andreas warmly welcomes Vlad with open arms. Vlad asks the priest if he slept well, and Andreas praises Vlad's deep devotion, noting he heard him praying late into the freezing night. Andreas laughs, claiming Vlad is more like a priest than he is, and warmly invites the young man to join him for breakfast. They bow their heads over the wooden table, with Andreas offering a solemn prayer of gratitude for their strength. The priest watches Vlad in silence, deeply moved that a young man in such a lowly place has not lost his profound faith. Andreas firmly resolves to lead the boy, believing this chance encounter is a divine fate charged to him by God. They happily eat their rare wheat bread, and the priest casually brings up Vlad's extraordinary swordsmanship. Andreas reveals that Sir Jaeger came to ask about him, leaving Vlad utterly shocked and on high alert. The priest proudly states he highly recommended Vlad, explaining that serving the prestigious Bayezid family will guarantee him a brilliant future. Vlad politely thanks him, but his mind instantly races as he realizes he has drawn far too much attention to himself. Walking through the quiet, snowy forest, Vlad mutters that being too close to the priest has officially ruined his cover. He asks the voice in his head if it is finally convinced he isn't an evil being, before suggesting they flee the camp tonight. Vlad realizes the officers will eventually discover he killed a thieving mercenary, meaning a self-defense claim won't work without witnesses. He plans to take Goethe and run to secure a fake plaque, but he suddenly senses a formidable, oppressive presence approaching. An advanced knight, clad in heavy armor, steps through the trees, his drawn sword gleaming in the dim light. Jaeger smiles, highly impressed that the young mercenary managed to sense his stealthy approach, and announces that Joseph Bayezid wishes to see him. Vlad maintains a perfect poker face, politely stating it is an honor as he prepares to face the high-ranking noble. As they walk, Jaeger asks if Vlad knew he was coming, and Vlad replies that he heard from the priest. Jaeger commands Vlad to follow him, and Vlad quietly considers running before realizing an elite knight of Jaeger's level could slay him instantly. With a heavy sigh of frustration, Vlad follows Jaeger toward the grand blue banners of the Bayezid headquarters. Joseph Bayezid turns to greet them with a serious expression, and Vlad bows respectfully to the young master. Joseph asks if Vlad has faced any inconveniences, and Vlad smoothly replies that everyone is deeply grateful for his generous meals. Joseph gazes intensely at Vlad's blonde hair and blue eyes, calmly asking if his name is truly Ryman. With a cold, piercing glare, Joseph declares that he absolutely abhors liars, addressing the boy by his real name, Vlad of Asura. Joseph reveals he has confirmed Vlad's mother was unmarried, mockingly asking the boy if he even knows who his father is. Vlad's blue eyes burn with fury at the insult, but Jaeger swiftly strikes him, forcing the arrogant kid to his knees to teach him manners. Joseph dismisses Jaeger's rough treatment with a laugh, stating he already knows exactly why Vlad fled from the city of Sawara. Joseph asks Vlad where he learned such exceptional swordplay, noting that the boy's quiet eyes are hiding far too many secrets. Vlad maintains his unwavering gaze, fabricating a lie about a nameless teacher who appeared and disappeared like lightning. Though Joseph senses the lie, he is highly impressed by the boy's absolute lack of fear under pressure. Joseph apologizes for the rough treatment, explaining that he is currently in a tight spot and has an irresistible offer to make. He asks Vlad if he wants to rise to a higher place, promising him power, survival, freedom, and knighthood. Joseph openly declares his desire to support Vlad's growth, offering him a golden ticket out of his miserable slum life. The very next morning, Jaeger drags Vlad into a snowy clearing, initiating a brutal, fast-paced sparring match. Onlookers marvel that Vlad is managing to hold out, though it is clear the elite knight is holding back. Jaeger mockingly calls Vlad an arrogant brat who doesn't know his place, unleashing a heavy downward strike. Realizing Jaeger is on an entirely different level, Vlad grits his teeth and pivots to unleash a desperate counterattack. Vlad crosses his wooden swords, channeling every ounce of his raw strength to block Jaeger's oppressive steel. Jaeger easily shatters Vlad's defense with a single, fluid sweep that leaves Vlad gasping in the snow. The watching soldiers cheer, while Jaeger notes that Vlad did well to survive the strike. Vlad breathes heavily, frustrated that Jaeger simply allowed him to land a minor blow as Jaeger announces they will spar twice a day. Walking back through the deep snow, Vlad grumbles that Jaeger did not offer him a single piece of actual advice. The demonic voice in his head explains that Jaeger is teaching him by ruthlessly cutting away all his useless movements. Meanwhile, Joseph watches Vlad from his study, confident that this talented but arrogant kid will make the perfect tool. He tells Jaeger that Vlad's back alley manners can be corrected slowly, believing he has found the exact man he needs. Jaeger warns that a disloyal sword cannot be trusted, but Joseph counters that a mutual relationship based on need is far more reliable. Jaeger nods in silent agreement as a massive shadow falls over their planning table. Joseph reflects on Vlad's wild, untrustworthy nature, comparing him to a ferocious wolf that needs to be tamed. He resolves to build a cage so massive that the trapped wolf will mistake his captivity for absolute freedom. As night falls over the camp, a shivering mercenary mutters that Vlad has officially been taken under Jaeger's wing. Roderick patrols the snowy path, sternly ordering his subordinate to keep his wits about him. The subordinate quickly assures him that everything is quiet, and Roderick heads back toward his tent. Suddenly, a snapping twig echoes through the dark forest, prompting Roderick to draw his sword and demand to know who is there. He spots a shadowy figure in the snow, realizing with a gasp that a strange woman is standing in the trees. Before he can act, a blinding flash of pink magical energy erupts from the darkness, catching Roderick completely off guard. A watching scout gasps in absolute horror as a massive shockwave of purple energy vaporizes the night instantly. The next morning, Vlad clutches his aching body, complaining about Jaeger's brutal, unforgiving sparring sessions. His companion laughs, pointing out that countless mercenaries would pay gold to spar with an advanced knight of Jaeger's caliber. Suddenly, a panicked Goethe runs into the clearing, screaming desperately for Vlad to look at him. Goethe quietly whispers that he is deserting the camp tonight, urging Vlad to join him before it is too late. When Vlad asks what he means, Goethe, trembling, explains that the forest they are exploring is cursed. He reveals that the missing soldiers weren't deserters, but were violently taken by a terrifying ghost that haunts the woods. Goethe adds that even their elite knight, Sir Roderick, went completely missing last night without leaving a single trace. Vlad stares into the snowy forest, realizing the rumors of the missing men are far more serious than he anticipated. Goethe mutters in frustration, wishing he had packed his belongings and fled earlier instead of trying to save Vlad. Meanwhile, Joseph Bayezid views the mysterious disappearances as a perfect opportunity to prove his worth over his half-brother. Jaeger notes that all the missing victims had black hair, advising that they must act quickly with Roderick gone. Jaeger arrives at the expedition camp, where Roderick's panicked subordinate, Arun, reports that they have searched the entire forest. Arun explains that even their elite hunters couldn't locate a single footprint, leaving Jaeger deeply contemplative. Jaeger commands the mercenaries to divide into groups of 3 and spread out, as Vlad quietly notes that something is terribly wrong. Goethe grumbles that Vlad is a fraud taking advantage of his goodwill. But Vlad tells him to shut up and focus on the search. Jaeger mockingly asks how a slum kid expects to find missing people. As the sun begins to set over the snowy peaks, Vlad quietly walks to the riverbank, asking if the search parties bothered to look beyond the rushing water. Vlad explains that the river wasn't on the original expedition path, meaning the missing knight might be on the other side. Jaeger orders the scattered mercenaries to gather at the riverbank to prepare for a crossing. Jaeger notes that the river is partially frozen, directing the men to divide into 3 groups to cross safely. The mercenaries reluctantly line up, their boots crunching in the thick snow as they approach the icy water. Goethe panics, shouting that his survival instincts are screaming at him, that crossing this river is a massive mistake. Goethe insists they should turn back, but Vlad stares intensely at the dark water, stating that he is certain of the danger ahead. Vlad stares coldly at the trembling Goethe, warning him that running away as a witness from this scene will only result in a swift and ugly death. Water splashes wildly around their boots as Goethe shrieks in terror, asking the captain if the thin ice beneath them is about to break. Vlad grimly confirms that it absolutely could, urging the trembling scout to get up because they are the only ones left behind. Griping his hilt tightly, Vlad glares into the dark fog as Goethe points a shaking finger toward the freezing water. With a horrified shriek, Goethe screams that the river is completely filled with the pale, frozen corpses of missing soldiers. Suddenly, the ice violently ruptures as a horde of water-logged undead reach their rotting hands up toward the living. The mercenaries panic as the riverbed collapses into shards of ice, with Jaeger shouting for everyone to quickly retreat to the safety of the banks. Vicious magical energy flares as the soldiers find themselves completely surrounded by a relentless army of the dead. A terrified mercenary begs Jaeger for orders, as the seasoned knight grimly realizes they have walked directly into a trap. Jaeger mutters that this is an incredibly elaborate ambush, meticulously planned by an enemy who knew their exact path. As the cold winter night consumes the forest, the squad braces for a desperate battle in the territory of the dead. Inside a grand, quiet chapel, holy devotees kneel before a massive altar, praying for the light to guide them on a righteous path. The solemn prayers are suddenly shattered as a golden cauldron of holy water begins to violently bubble and swirl with dark energy. The elderly priest gasps in absolute horror, sensing an overwhelming wave of pure evil descending upon the snowy mountains. Back in the foggy forest, a pale woman in a tattered white dress emerges from the shadows, wailing hysterically for her lost child. She unleashes a deafening, supernatural shriek that drives the frontline mercenaries to scream in agonizing pain. Blades clash violently against dark magic as the squad desperately fights to keep the shrieking specter at bay. Vlad charges forward with his training sword, executing a flurry of rapid-fire strikes to deflect the incoming magical shards. Vlad bellows at the cowering Goethe to pick up a spear, urging his men to pick a single direction to break through the encirclement. A massive blast of blue lightning arcs across the dark sky, obliterating the frozen ground and scattering the soldiers. A masked warrior lunges from the shadows, his green eyes flashing as he swings his blade with lethal intent. The mercenaries shriek in pain as the endless horde of monsters continues to swarm, leaving Jaeger to grit his teeth in frustration. Jaeger realizes the trap was set by a highly calculated enemy, and their primary target is none other than the young master, Joseph. Unleashing a blinding green wave of energy from his sword, Jaeger ruthlessly cleaves through the front line of attackers. A brilliant pillar of magical light erupts, shaking the forest floor as Jaeger struggles to hold the line. Jaeger commands the scattered troops to gather near him, desperately shouting Vlad's real name across the battlefield. Jaeger orders Vlad to fulfill his contract and protect Joseph at all costs, while Vlad looks back with a distressed expression. He commands Vlad to retreat to the post immediately and hold out for as long as humanly possible. Vlad nods firmly and grabs the trembling Goethe, sprinting back through the snow toward the primary camp. Meanwhile, the missing Sir Roderick suddenly stumbles into the clearing, bloodied and gasping as he apologizes for his late arrival. The surviving squad members look on in shock as a massive, armored monster looms behind the fallen knight. Deep inside the main camp, Joseph Bayezid sits quietly at his desk, listening to the distant, terrifying screams of his men. A panicked soldier named Vorden bursts into the tent, screaming for Joseph to flee the incoming slaughter. Joseph gazes at him coldly, asking how Vorden could run straight to him without even bothering to assess the battlefield. Joseph points out that Vorden didn't even bother to draw his sword, asking the coward if he considers himself lucky. Vorden begs for forgiveness just as Father Andreas enters the tent, his expression deeply serious. The priest presents a holy Bible, showing Joseph that the holy ink on the pages is trembling like a leaf in a storm. Andreas warns that an incredibly evil presence has invaded the mountain, promising to use his divine powers to hold it back for as long as possible. Joseph quietly thanks him, noting that the priest's holy barriers are currently their only option for survival. Joseph commands his personal guard to move, but as they step outside, a thick, freezing winter fog rolls over the tents. Terrified screams echo through the mist as the hallucination-inducing fog begins to drive the mercenaries completely insane. Andreas warns that the fog is entirely unnatural, as Joseph clutches his head, struggling to fight off the dark whispers clawing at his mind. Through the blinding mist, Joseph catches fleeting, painful memories of his childhood and the cold faces of his family. A terrifying, ghostly woman floats down from the dark sky, her pale face twisted into a menacing grin as she reaches out for them. She whispers that she has finally found her lost child, her jaw stretching open to swallow the survivors. With a sudden, violent explosion of dark magic, the ghostly woman smashes through the camp's primary defenses. She wails in agony as the soldiers desperately swing their weapons, but their standard steel blades pass harmlessly through her spectral form. Joseph watches in despair, realizing his elite guards are completely incapable of striking down the cursed entity even with the priest's blessings. Joseph grinds his teeth, muttering that this spiteful curse was specifically designed to destroy his faction. A young soldier named Jean collapses, coughing violently as Father Andreas desperately tries to maintain his holy barrier. Jean struggles to breathe, while Andreas floats in a pillar of golden light, pouring every ounce of his remaining divine power into the shield. The priest's strength rapidly fades, and Joseph realizes their defensive hymns will stop completely within seconds. Staring at the snarling face of the ghostly mother, Joseph wonders if this is his final resting place. Suddenly, Vlad lunges through the fog, his sword humming with a brilliant, glowing blue magical energy. The demonic voice in his head warns Vlad that a normal sword cannot cut through her, asking if he is truly prepared to use aura. Vlad firmly demands that the voice borrow his body to manifest the power, refusing to let his allies die. As raw blue electricity crackles around his limbs, Vlad asks if the technique is truly possible. The silver-haired voice warns that the physical backlash will be extreme, but Vlad replies that he will die anyway if they fail. Vlad grips his hilt with absolute resolve, stating he made a solemn promise to Joseph that he must keep. Standing under the starry night sky, Vlad prepares to execute a strike backed not by blind loyalty, but by pure faith. The voice agrees to his terms, and Vlad charges the screaming specter with a blinding burst of speed. The monstrous woman roars in fury as Vlad slides beneath her icy claws, his blade cutting deep into her spectral skin. The voice commands Vlad to close his right eye to visualize the world of aura as a massive wave of blue energy explodes outward. With his left eye glowing with intense magical light, Vlad unleashes a spectacular, rapid-fire sequence of slashes. The ghostly woman shrieks in agony as Vlad's magically enhanced blade completely shatters her dark defenses. A blinding blue arc of aura cleaves the fog, leaving Joseph and the surviving soldiers watching in absolute awe. Joseph screams Vlad's name as the sheer physical toll of channeling the elite aura causes the young boy to collapse heavily into the snow. Jaeger mutters that those were definitely genuine traces of aura, realizing Vlad has paid a terrifyingly high price to manifest it. Though weakened, the spectral mother lunges again, prompting Joseph to draw his sword and order Andreas to keep up the hymns. Joseph catches the falling Vlad, supporting his weight as the screaming ghost claws her way toward them. Vorden suddenly charges forward, begging Joseph to let him handle the beast to redeem his past cowardice. Vorden executes a desperate downward slash, buying Joseph and Vlad precious seconds to escape the monster's reach. Joseph looks down at Vlad, admitting with a soft smile that this is the very first time he is glad to have the boy by his side. Vlad weakly whispers that they must send the tragic woman's spirit off, and Father Andreas steps forward to deliver the final blessing. With a solemn expression, Andreas raises his sword, channeling a pure, blinding holy blessing onto the bloody steel. With a clean, decisive sweep, the holy blade pierces the ghostly mother, releasing her from the dark torment of the curse. The woman collapses onto the stone floor, tearfully begging them to find her child in her final moments. Through her fading memories, the tragic reality is revealed. She was a loving mother who wailed in despair as her child froze to death on the cold floor. Andreas gently whispers for her to finally rest in peace as her spectral form evaporates into a warm, glittering blue light. Tears stream down the woman's face as she finally reunites with her child in the afterlife, leaving Vlad to kneel peacefully in the quiet mountains. The corrupting fog and toxic odor of burnt magic finally lift from the mountain range, leaving the ruined plaza completely quiet. Watching from the cliffs, a hidden scout marvels that someone actually managed to destroy the curse, wondering who possessed such power. Jaeger tracks the source of the curse, cornering the shadowy puppet master who is controlling the dead from the darkness. Jaeger stares coldly at the hooded figure, identifying him as the rat responsible for the entire tragedy. They retrieve a small wooden chest that served as the frozen child's coffin, carrying it carefully through the deep snow. Jaeger hands the chest over to the priest, admitting that while the expedition was a failure, Vlad's incredible performance saved their lives. 4 days later, Vlad finally opens his eyes, his body still aching from the severe recoil of channeling the aura. Jaeger visits his bedside, warning Vlad to be far more careful with such dangerous techniques in the future. Vlad rests on his bed, relieved that the camp stayed put to wait for his recovery instead of abandoning him. Vlad steps outside only to find the camp completely deserted, before Goethe runs over, screaming in delight that Vlad is finally awake. Vlad mockingly points out that the coward who wanted to run stayed back the longest, and Goethe proudly claims he was offered a fat raise. Goethe urges Vlad to put in a good word for him with Jaeger, and Vlad smiles, promising he will do his best. Vlad walks over to the grand white tents, where Jaeger commands him to report to Joseph immediately. Inside the barracks, Joseph pours Vlad a glass of wine, asking if he can handle a nobleman's drink. Vlad politely replies that he used to work in a brothel cum bar, and Joseph warmly thanks him for keeping his contract when he could have easily fled. Joseph admits Vlad is a rare talent he cannot afford to lose, formally inviting him to join the house of Bayezid. Vlad proudly accepts, and the party departs for Varna, the grand religious capital of the Bayezid County. As they enter the bustling city streets, Jaeger notices Vlad looking around in awe and asks if it is his first time in a major city. Jaeger mockingly calls him a country bumpkin, but kindly tells him to take the day off and report to the city hall by nightfall. Vlad mutters a playful complaint about the strict night, looking forward to getting a greasy hot meal with his expedition pay. Suddenly, a church official approaches Vlad, delivering an urgent invitation from Father Andreas. Vlad gasps in absolute awe as he is guided toward the grand, towering stone spires of the Varna Cathedral. The official explains that Varna is the county's religious center, guiding Vlad inside to meet the priest. Vlad gazes at the magnificent, ornate altar, realizing that despite his fake mercenary name meaning praying Raimon, he has never prayed once. Vlad wonders if he has committed a sin, but Father Andreas suddenly enters the hall with a warm, welcoming smile. Vlad politely thanks the priest for the invitation, and Andreas hands him a beautifully crafted ID token. Andreas explains that while Joseph's favor is powerful, an official ID token backed by the church is respected across the entire continent. Vlad looks at the token in absolute disbelief, seeing Father Andreas' name written clearly as his legal guarantor. Andreas gently tells Vlad to seek him out whenever he is in need, formally declaring himself as the boy's protector. A nameless boy from the back alleys, unable to even have his birth registered, has finally written his name in the vast world. No longer a nameless orphan, the young swordmaster is officially registered as Vlad of Suara. The grand county of Bayezid spans 12 towns, including the harbor of Suara, the cathedral of Varna, and the capital city, Sturma. Vlad and the mercenaries arrive at the colossal palace gates in Sturma, officially welcomed as Joseph's personal guests. An officer sternly warns them to stay put and behave like civilized guests to protect Joseph's reputation. The mercenaries nod, and a maid swings open the massive wooden doors to reveal the grand, lavishly decorated parlor. Goethe stands with his mouth wide open in awe, while a sudden voice from the shadows notes they have never seen them before. A sharp cracking sound echoes through the grand parlor, as a mysterious, dark-haired man grumbles about his failed attempt to sneak around and goof off. Vlad steps into the lavish room, his sharp blue eyes instantly locking onto the stranger as the man coldly demands to know who they are. Vlad's martial instincts flare in absolute alarm, realizing this stranger possesses a suffocating, lethal aura that could cut a man in two with a single glance. A trembling Goethe quickly stammers out his name, while the dark-haired powerhouse stares back with a piercing, analytical gaze. Vlad steps forward with an unwavering stare, proudly introducing himself as Vlad of Sora and drawing an intense look from the noble. The imposing man extends his hand, casually offering Vlad a handful of peanuts while testing the boy's resolve. Maintaining his strict guard, Vlad bluntly refuses the food, stating they were explicitly ordered not to touch anything in the parlor. Goethe nearly faints from sheer panic, silently screaming that Vlad has lost his mind by offending the most dangerous person in the room. The stranger chuckles and walks away, leaving the narrator to reveal that Vlad just openly slighted Rudiger, the Count's elite eldest son. Deep within the inner palace, Count Bayezid addresses Jager, promising a massive reward if he can successfully raise Joseph's new recruit into an elite knight. The Count turns to his advisor Ragmus, noting that while the sword is not Joseph's primary strength, his eye for talent cannot be denied. The Count checks on his advisor's well-being before dismissing him, his mind completely focused on the dark events unfolding across his borders. Ragmus bows deeply and departs across the ornate red carpets, his expression remaining intensely serious. An elderly, white-haired high priest mutters that they must secure powerful medicine, while the Count reflects on the suspicious details in Joseph's report. The high priest firmly states they must uncover the shadowy organization responsible for setting the elaborate ambush in Varna. The advisors discuss the possibility of a coordinated threat, but the Count dismisses their worries with absolute authority. The Count declares that the mighty house of Bayezid stands unshakable and will ruthlessly obliterate anyone who dares endanger his family or his lands. As a full moon rises over the massive capital city, the ominous clouds of an impending conflict begin to gather. Jager finally enters the barracks, letting a exhausted Goethe know that his official reward will be delivered tomorrow morning. Goethe leaves to search for food, allowing Joseph Bayezid to sit down with Vlad for a private, high-stakes discussion. Seated in his ornate chair, Joseph notes that Vlad saved his life and has promised to devote his sword to his cause. Joseph points out a critical contradiction. Vlad demands absolute freedom, yet promises total loyalty to a noble lord. Joseph demands total clarity, sharply asking Vlad what exactly he intends to achieve with his freedom. Vlad stares back in absolute silence, his mind instantly flashing to the silver-haired knight who destroyed his world. Vlad asks Joseph if he knows of Godin of Gaidar, the monstrous executioner who resembles cold blue moonlight. Joseph is stunned, realizing Vlad is aiming for a massive, near-impossible goal of blood vengeance against a premier powerhouse. Vlad admits he can never forget the man who murdered his savior, stating Godin is an adversary he must strike down. Joseph shakes his head, calmly explaining that a figure of Godin's stature is currently completely beyond his reach or influence. Vlad admits he expected this answer, prompting Joseph to modify their contract to a strict 7-year vow. Joseph addresses Vlad of Sora, declaring that he is laying aside his noble pride to offer him a guaranteed, brilliant future. He promises to feed, clothe, and train Vlad for 7 full years, raising him into an elite knight who will never fall short. In return, Vlad must obey his commands, with Joseph reminding him that he is forbidden from chasing Godin until his training is complete. However, Joseph grants him full permission to handle the back alleys of Sawara, noting he knows Amina is currently safe in a convent. Joseph points out that a single sword cannot change the world, asking Vlad if he will accept the contract and use his lord's influence as a weapon. Later that evening, Jager questions Joseph about why he went so far to secure a rebellious slum kid. Joseph replies that while all youths have potential, Vlad possesses an unpredictable, rebellious spark that he saw clearly with his own eyes. He tells Jager that 7 years is more than enough time to leash, appease, and completely pacify the wild wolf. Jager nods firmly, promising to do his best to ensure the difficult recruit produces a spectacular, shining result. Joseph smiles, reflecting that Vlad isn't just a useful wild animal, but a wolf that is actively chasing the moon. The next morning, Vlad is shown to his new, private quarters inside the magnificent palace training complex. Vlad is delighted by the clean floors and soft bed, forcing Jaeger to recall that the boy spent his entire life in the dirt. Vlad dismisses his lingering worries about offending Rudiger over the peanuts, as Jaeger orders him to report to the training grounds after eating. While walking through the courtyard, Jaeger suddenly stops and introduces Vlad to a high-ranking noblewoman, Lady Oksana. Jaeger bows respectfully, explaining that Joseph personally brought this talented young fighter into their household. Lady Oksana turns her gentle gaze onto Vlad, her long green hair flowing elegantly over her fine robes. She warmly thanks Vlad for saving her son's life during the mountain expedition, while Vlad respectfully states he merely fulfilled his duty. Oksana insists on rewarding him, stepping close to note that his new custom garments perfectly match his intense blue eyes. She smiles and adds that he has broad shoulders for someone so skinny, advising him to eat well and gain some healthy weight. Vlad stammers out a nervous thank you as the noblewoman bids Jaeger a good day and departs with her attendants. Vlad lets out a massive sigh of relief, prompting an amused Jaeger to note that the encounter wasn't bad for his first time meeting a high noble. Jaeger commands him to go eat, and Vlad heads into the grand cafeteria where a large crowd of young vassals has gathered. Suddenly, a loud crash echoes through the hall as an arrogant noble vassal named Sovanin intentionally dumps a pot of greasy soup over a clumsy recruit. Sovanin sneers uproariously, loudly joking that he smelled garbage and mistook the low-tier vassal for a literal trash can. The noble faction bursts into cruel laughter, but Vlad steps into the center of the room, his eyes turning cold and dangerous. The noble bullies complain that their fun-hazing ritual has been interrupted, as Vlad walks directly up to the ringleader. Vlad coldly demands to know Sovanin's name, unleashing a terrifying, suffocating wave of slum-born aura that silences the entire cafeteria. Sovanin trembles in absolute dread under the intense pressure, stammering out his name as Vlad promises to remember it. Vlad immediately initiates a brutal, rapid-fire brawl, delivering precise, punishing strikes that thoroughly crush the arrogant bullies. Watching the discipline from a high balcony, Jaeger and Gregory note that the new kid is remarkably skilled despite his crude form. Gregory points out that Jaeger is watching his vassal intently, wondering how far the boy's combat limits truly extend. They agree to let Vlad handle the dispute his own way, as the young swordmaster stands victoriously over the beaten noble vassals. Vlad executes a flawless, visceral sweep to disarm the final attacker, leaving the remaining bullies groaning in pain on the stone floor. An older knight comments that Vlad's form is technically sloppy, but praises the kid for aggressively applying everything Jaeger has taught him. Vlad remembers Jaeger's advice about deception, shifting his shoulders and gaze to completely manipulate his opponent's movements. With lightning speed, Vlad drives his blade forward, using his body weight to thoroughly lock down the enemy's defense. The cafeteria rings with the sound of breaking wood and heavy impacts as Vlad systematically dismantles the entire hazing faction. Vlad pins the terrified Sovanin to the floor, mockingly asking him if he wants to snicker a bit more like he did earlier. The onlookers watch in stunned silence, wondering if it is truly acceptable for a new recruit to deliver such a savage beating inside the manor. Jaeger commands them to leave Vlad alone, as the young swordmaster finally sheaths his weapon and lets the crying bullies go. 1587 JPEG, 1588, 1591.jpg. Sovanin barks a furious complaint about being humiliated, but Vlad calmly walks away without offering a single word. Vlad offers a brief, half-hearted apology for getting too engrossed in the training, leaving the elite vassals to glare at his back. Vlad delivers a chilling final warning to the remaining noble faction, declaring that their torment won't end with just a single cafeteria fight. Vlad mockingly tells them to summon him if their soup is too bland so he can spit in it, leaving the nobles calling him a certified mad dog. Later that evening, Goethe visits Vlad at his table, laughing as he mentions that the servants are gossiping about Vlad beating up the highborn vassals. Vlad asks how Goethe is adjusting to his new job as a stable hand, and Goethe proudly boasts that he serves the great Count Bayezid. Goethe notes that attacking nobles is technically a crime, but Vlad casually replies that he has always been a criminal from the slums anyway. Vlad points out that he left no permanent marks on them, noting that the silence is far more comfortable now that no one dares bother him. Suddenly, a clumsy young vassal named Portly Canor approaches their table, holding a wooden tray and nervously introducing himself. Vlad calmly tells Portly to either sit down or get lost, and Portly joyfully thanks him, admitting he has been entirely isolated and eating alone. Portly reveals that his father is the manor's primary food supplier, explaining that he noticed Vlad asking the cooks for extra sausage earlier. Portly shares his extra meat with Vlad, stating his family sends him far too much food to ever finish by himself. Vlad realizes that while the other vassals are snobbish young masters, establishing a genuine connection with Portly will guarantee a reliable ally. Vlad smiles and welcomes him to the table, declaring that as fellow vassals of the House of Bayezid, they need to stick together. Walking through the grand corridors, Jaeger mutters that raising a wild slum kid into a proper human being is an incredibly exhausting chore. Sir Gregory intercepts him in the hallway, laughing loudly as he notes Jaeger is making his extreme displeasure far too obvious. Jaeger replies that he is incredibly busy managing his recruit, but Gregory advises him to stop coddling the boy so much. Gregory boasts that his own vassal, Portly, is already perfectly mature, advising Jaeger to focus on fixing Vlad's wild character. Gregory notes that knights shouldn't meddle too deeply in vassal squabbles, but mentions that Vlad and Portly seem to be warming up to each other. He admits Portly is his cousin's nephew, asking Jaeger to ensure Vlad doesn't end up beating the clumsy boy up in the barracks. Gregory offers to return the favor with political help later if Jaeger can keep Vlad's violent impulses on a tight leash. They look down at the training grounds, where Vlad is executing a spectacular sequence of rapid slashes that leaves Gregory completely awestruck. Later that afternoon, Portly watches Vlad struggle in the stables, pointing out that the captain's massive problem isn't combat, but riding a horse. Portly notes that the manor's horses are perfectly trained, yet they completely freak out and run away whenever Vlad steps near them. Vlad groans in immense frustration, admitting that dogs, cats, and all kinds of wild animals have instinctively hated and feared his aura since childhood. Vlad points out that he successfully rode Jaeger's horse during their midnight escape from Varna, prompting Portly to note that Jaeger's mount is a highly expensive stallion. An attendant suddenly interrupts them, delivering an urgent message that Lady Oksana has requested Vlad's presence immediately. Vlad enters the opulent dressing room, where a smiling Lady Oksana remarks that his fine new attire completely conceals his rough back alley origins. She instructs the tailors to keep the garments loose, noting that since Vlad is only 17 years old, his body is still growing. Vlad bows deeply to thank her, and Oksana gently replies that as the savior of her son's life, it is she who owes him an endless debt of gratitude. Exiting the dressing room, Vlad sighs in relief, muttering that dealing with high-born noble ladies is far more difficult than fighting monsters. Vlad looks down at the smooth silk sleeves, reflecting that the comfortable luxury of the palace still feels entirely foreign to his soul. The voice in his head mockingly warns him that the luxury is designed to make his warrior instincts fat and soft, urging him to guard his inner flame. Suddenly, brutal shouting echoes from the courtyard below as a group of noble vassals corners Portly Canner near the storage barrels. The noble bullies aggressively punch Portly, fiercely screaming at him for acting high and mighty just because he befriended the new slum kid. Portly collapses heavily into the dirt, while Vlad watches the assault through a metal gate with his blue eyes narrowing into slits. Vlad grimly reflects that everywhere you go, malicious rascals are exactly the same, always preying on the weak to assert their unearned dominance. Tightening his custom cloak around his broad shoulders, Vlad grips his masterwork hilt and steps out to settle the score. Late that night, Vlad corners the bully leader in a dark alleyway, his silent presence catching the noble completely off guard. Vlad coldly announces that he has come to extract a specific payment, completely unbothered by the noble's panicked threats as he prepares his strike. Vlad glares out from the shadows of the dark woods, coldly telling his hidden stalkers that having a proper crowd is at least better than eating dinner alone. He warns them not to complain about unfairness, stating he is simply here to extract a perfectly right and fair price from them. Vlad draws his masterwork blade with blinding speed, facing a staggering 14-to-1 ambush without showing a single trace of fear. Vlad mocks the noble vassals, pointing out that even low-life street thugs have more honor than a pack of young masters teaming up against a single opponent. The noble leader furiously commands Vlad to shut his mouth, ordering his armed squad to lunge forward and completely crush the arrogant slumdog. With a fierce, combined war cry, the armed noble vassals charge from the tree line with their swords drawn. Vlad flashes a bloodthirsty, predatory smile, welcoming the incoming assault as his blade crackles with raw, lethal energy. Vlad moves like a localized hurricane, executing a sequence of visceral, rapid-fire strikes that shatters their weapons and sends the front line crashing hard into the dirt. The remaining attackers panic in absolute horror, screaming that this gutter kid is a completely different monster compared to his restrained form during training. The noble ringleader desperately barks at his men to hold their ground, threatening to execute anyone who dares take a single step back. Vlad easily slides beneath a clumsy slash, mockingly asking the wealthy young masters if any of them have ever actually seen real blood splatter before tonight. Vlad reflects on his brutal daily sparring sessions with Jaeger, realizing the grueling discipline has polished his movements to absolute perfection. Vlad delivers a punishing, bone-shattering blow that sends another heavily armored vassal flying violently through the branches. With perfect spatial awareness, Vlad locks onto the gaps in their defense, completely mastering his own flow of combat. He drives his steel forward with rapid-fire speed, leaving the surviving noble bullies droning in intense pain on the frozen ground. The noble leader gasps in sheer terror as Vlad emerges from the clearing, his masterwork blade held vertically as he locks on to his final target. With a swift, decisive strike, Vlad thoroughly neutralizes the bully, leaving him weeping and bloodied in the dirt. Vlad stands triumphantly over the fallen leader, coldly ordering him never to look him in the eye again and never to touch his companion portly. The broken bully trembles in absolute dread, realizing with a gasp that the slum-born mad dog was genuinely prepared to murder him. Vlad calmly cleans his weapon, muttering that this beating fully settles the debt for his fine dinner, before turning to glare at the remaining onlookers. Vlad asks who is next, but the terrified survivors scramble backward, completely broken by his overwhelming combat aura. Watching the spectacular discipline from a distance, Jaeger notes that the kid's progression is outstanding before heading back to the inner palace. The next morning, the high-ranking knights of the capital assemble in the grand hall for their regular monthly meeting. Knight's Order. Captain Anatalis presents an official scroll, announcing a massive reorganization of guard schedules to prepare for Rudiger's upcoming departure. The political atmosphere in the hall turns incredibly hostile, with Rudiger's furious supporters looking ready to tear Joseph's faction apart. Joseph's companions notice that Count Bayezid is secretly smiling at the report, leaving them deeply contemplative. As the meeting concludes, an angry noble knight grumbles that Joseph has brought a rabid dog into the manor who doesn't even know who he shouldn't bite. Jaeger calmly walks past the glaring crowd, completely unbothered by their petty complaints as they leave the hall. A fellow officer laughs at the noble faction's boiling rage, asking Jaeger how he plans to manage his controversial new recruit. He mentions that even the palace drill instructors have labeled Vlad as a pain in the neck who operates completely beyond the standard. Jaeger thanks him for the information, secretly proud that his pupil has thoroughly shaken up the snobbish noble household. Back in the barracks, Vlad is presented with a large wooden chest containing fine, custom-tailored equipment gifted directly by the Count. The mercenaries marvel at the gear, realizing the armor is crafted entirely from premium, northern grey orc leather. Jaeger explains that grey orc leather is highly rare, meaning the Count has taken an extraordinary liking to Vlad's talent. The officers agree that no other young vassal in the manor can currently rival Vlad's position, warning that they cannot afford to sit idly either. Joseph Bayezid studies a highly unusual official paper invitation, noting that this is no ordinary summons. He asks Jaeger if his squad is prepared to respond to it, and Jaeger firmly replies that he is ready for some real action. With their plans officially decided, Joseph announces that the entire Bayezid faction is deploying to the gateway territory of Dirmar. As they ride across the plains, Jaeger explains that Dirmar is a vital northern trading gate famous for its lemons. Joseph adds that the ruling Heinel family is currently locked in a brutal succession dispute, providing a perfect opportunity for them to expand their influence. Vlad listens intently from inside the carriage, muttering that the political world of high nobility is incredibly complicated. Jaeger remarks that having bloody feuds with family members who share your blood is a long-standing tradition of the aristocrats. The narrator explains that the rightful heir, Alicia Heinel, has been falsely accused of illegitimacy by her treacherous uncle Andre. To prove her innocence and claim the title of Baron, she has been forced into a high-stakes duel organized by the church. Vlad finds her resolve deeply impressive, wondering what kind of elite champion a lord would hire to defend their honor. Suddenly, Goethe barks a furious complaint, asking how Vlad can ride comfortably inside the carriage while his commanding knight is out riding a horse. Vlad looks away in embarrassment, grumbling that animals instinctively hate his aura and he is physically unable to mount a standard horse. Goethe rages that a noble vassal should be riding a fine steed, completely exasperated by Vlad's bizarre limitation. Vlad ignores the shouting, trying to calm his racing heart as he reflects on his strict daily routine under Joseph and Jaeger. Suddenly, a violent earth tremor rattles the path, causing Vlad and Jaeger to assume they are experiencing an earthquake. Jaeger commands the entire convoy to halt immediately, screaming for Joseph to duck as the ground violently ruptures. Joseph remains perfectly calm as the massive shockwave ripples through the trees and passes them by. As the dust settles, a shaken mercenary notes it was his first earthquake, but Jaeger sharply corrects him. Jaeger points toward the valley, where a colossal, segmented monster known as a giant deathworm dives back into the earth. Vlad stares in awe at the massive beast, realizing the legends of the remnant of the fallen dragon are entirely real. The party finally arrives at the grand, fortified gates of Dirmar, the sole capital city of the Heinal family. Joseph grants Vlad absolute freedom to explore the city alone, advising him to use the opportunity to observe the diverse knights gathered here. Joseph explains that showing him real combat once is far more memorable than lecturing him 10 times, hoping to foster the boy's growth. Joseph jokingly warns Vlad not to get beaten up in some alleyway, and Vlad retorts that he isn't that stupid. Joseph commands him to report back every single evening, and Vlad happily heads out to inspect the ancient city. Vlad notes that the local architecture looks incredibly old and poorly maintained, realizing the lemon-producing territory is currently broke. Spotting a tall tree on a distant hill, Vlad decides to find a quiet clearing to practice his forms and offer a prayer. Vlad hikes up to an ancient, overgrown noble graveyard, drawing his sword to carefully clear away the thick vines and fallen leaves. Meanwhile, Joseph Bayezid enters the grand hall of the estate, formally greeting the rightful heir of the territory. Joseph states that Count Bayezid has fully authorized his intervention, explaining that the call of kinship requires him to answer her crisis. The hooded heir, Miss Alicia, declares her mind is firmly made up, promising that victory in the upcoming duel will belong to her faction. Jaeger draws his sword in a solemn pledge of victory before the officers assemble on the grand staircase to finalize their strategy. Jaeger notes that Alicia carries the strong temperament of a matriarch and held the upper hand until the very last moment of their meeting. Joseph resolves to keep their original plan unchanged as the sun sets over the quiet northern landscape. Back at the hill, Vlad stands in the clearing, wishing he could have built a peaceful resting place like this for his own mother. Suddenly, a brilliant flash of blue magical energy flares, and Vlad realizes the magnificent serpentine guardian of the graveyard is watching him. The ethereal spirit coils tightly around the ancient tree trunk, its glowing blue irises locking onto the young swordmaster. The demonic voice in Vlad's head asks to borrow his body for a moment to commune with the powerful entity. Vlad willingly surrenders control, allowing the ancient voice to anchor its immense presence inside his physical limbs. A dazzling shockwave of green and blue magical energy ripples through the graveyard as the voice executes a perfect spiritual form. Vlad gasps in absolute shock as the massive, white-scaled spirit descends from the canopy, surrounded by a vibrant magical light. The voice explains that this magnificent entity is a high guardian spirit that explicitly recognizes the raw power sleeping inside Vlad's soul. Vlad drops to his knees as the giant serpentine creature floats down calmly, emitting a comforting wave of spring-like warmth. As the spirit slowly dissolves into light, a stern voice from the gateway sharply demands to know who Vlad is. Vlad looks up to see an elegant woman in fine white robes standing in the clearing, glaring at him with intense blue eyes. She strictly informs him that no one outside of the noble Heinal bloodline is permitted to enter this sacred family ground. Vlad quickly bows and apologizes, explaining he was simply looking for a quiet, respectful place to pray and mean no harm. Vlad lifts his holy wooden cross pendant, proudly introducing himself as a loyal vassal serving under Sir Jaeger. Vlad completely mistakes her for an estate maid, awkwardly offering to help her clean up the graves so his master Joseph won't get into political trouble. The blue-haired woman stares at the earnest boy in silence, mildly amused by his complete lack of recognition. Vlad points out that he already swept the dirt as common courtesy to the lords of the land, asking her to keep his presence a secret from Jogger. She agrees to stay quiet if he promises to clean the remaining plots exceptionally well, leaving Vlad to grumble that pretty women are always difficult to convince. Vlad spends the afternoon sweeping the cemetery beneath the falling leaves, while the mysterious woman watches his dedicated work with a quiet smile. The next morning, Vlad joins the massive crowd gathered at the grand arena, the air vibrating with the sounds of heavy impacts. Vlad watches an intense warm-up sparring match between two elite warriors, marveling at the sheer visceral strength of the knights. He notes that their combat proficiency is staggering, realizing he must expand his own limits to ever earn the title of a true knight. Vlad reflects on his journey from the back alleys of Suara, realizing his true place in this vast world is still a long path away. The heralds blow their horns as the day of the official holy duel finally arrives, the arena packing tightly with noble spectators. The treacherous uncle, Andre Hanal, enters the arena with his arms crossed, confidently preparing to claim the Baron's seat. Jaeger stands with Vlad on the viewing platform, advising the boy to keep his eyes wide open to witness a genuine, high-stakes duel between elite knights. Jaeger notices the shock written all over Vlad's face, gently reminding him that a child must learn to walk before he can attempt to run. He tells Vlad that the higher his ultimate goal, the longer the path he must walk, as the herald commands the entire crowd to show their respect. Vlad murmurs that he hasn't seen the young master of Dirmar even once, looking toward the grand entrance archway. The announcer bellows that Alicia Heinel has officially entered the sand, and Vlad freezes in absolute, jaw-dropping disbelief. Vlad realizes with a shock that the elegant blue-haired master of Dirmar is the exact same maids he met at the graveyard. Alicia draws her magnificent blade, declaring before the watching gods that she is ready to defend her family's honor. The two champions lock eyes across the sand, preparing to initiate an honorable yet brutal duel with everything on the line. The world was once a place of peace, but that peace is shattered as two warriors face down in a quiet hallway, steel drawn and tension thick. Though noble blood is set to run a clear blue color, Alicia is not about to let her own blood run cold just yet. A desperate shout to stop rings out across the battlefield as a white-haired man raises his hands, throwing in the towel after a devastating, explosive strike. The victor informs Sir Duncan that his master has surrendered, prompting a battle-weary captain to solemnly ask his subordinate if he still commands his respect. A proud lord laments how the boy he raised to be the future of his house has returned as a traitorous sword, aiming for his master's throat, leaving him bloody and full of shame. The crowd roars as Sir Chard is declared the victor of the duel, and the announcer wastes no time calling the next proxies to step forward onto the grand stage. The administrator sternly reminds the combatants that utilizing magical aura is strictly forbidden, and the match will only end by surrender or serious injury. An intense stare-down commences between the challengers, their eyes locking with pure determination as they prepare to clash. Memories of a past lesson rush back, where a teacher raised a glowing blade and declared that the day's study material would be a wild beast from the central region. A fierce battle erupts with an explosive shockwave as a young warrior lunges headfirst into a brutal exchange of blows. The combatants trade heavy strikes in a flurry of dust, with one fighter realizing he is only a single step away from closing the gap. With a satisfied grin, a warrior swings a massive blade through the air, forcing his heavy-breathing opponent to dodge backward. A calm onlooker observes the duel, noting that the overwhelming pressure of the match must be deeply felt by the swordsman himself. Frustrated shouts echo as a fighter struggles to reach his foe, only to be met with a swift, mocking dodge and a brutal counterslash coated in purple light. Angered by the taunt, the warrior lunges forward with a furious strike, swinging his sword in a wide, desperate arc. The high-speed clash intensifies as a challenger yells for his ally to watch closely, intending for this very display to be a demonstration. Unleashing a massive burst of blue energy, the swordsman charges forward with a ferocious thrust, catching the attention of the shocked spectators. The opponent groans in pain as a devastating blow lands, sending him staggering backward from the sheer impact of the assault. The young fighter maneuvers smoothly through the chaos, drawing attention to how he masterfully forced a defensive gap in his foe's guard. This brilliant maneuver is explained as the ultimate counterattack technique, leaving the warrior poised to strike with his glistening steel. Swords screech as they grind against each other, leaving the challenger standing firm while his opponent struggles to keep his footing. Onlookers gasp at a display of skill so insanely high that it feels like an insurmountable wall standing between them and victory. Spitting blood and admitting defeat, the beaten warrior surrenders, prompting the announcer to declare Lady Alicia's proxy, Sir Jaeger, as the undisputed winner. As the combatants walk away, a mentor asks if the demonstration was clear, receiving a nod of quiet gratitude from his young student. The announcer calls for the final duel of the day, and Pablo of Arnstein steps forward with a grim, serious expression. Pablo is questioned about his tense posture as his formidable opponent, Joubert of Shahzad, prepares to enter the ring. Acknowledging his opponent, Pablo readies himself, while spectators note that while Pablo is highly capable, Joubert is on a completely different level of lethality. Joubert casts a sharp glance toward the royal throne, where Lady Alicia sits in quiet anticipation of the final match. Confusion ripples through the crowd as Joubert suddenly raises his hands, stepping back from his ready stance with a calm expression. To everyone's utter shock, Joubert loudly declares that he is withdrawn from the duel entirely, leaving his opponent standing in stunned silence. The opposing faction immediately erupts in triumphant cheers, claiming that a forfeit means the entire match is decided right then and there. They demand that the gods acknowledge their victory, claiming this proves theirs is the only rightful house to hold power. A cold voice cuts through the celebration, declaring that the fight is far from over and that a forfeit is not an acceptable conclusion. As tensions threaten to boil over, a northern representative steps in, urging the hosts to hear out the protest to avoid a bloody conflict between regions. The nobles whisper anxiously, realizing that a misstep here could spark an all-out war, prompting a quiet query on how to proceed. Joseph decides that they must play a calculated defensive game to secure a future, stepping forward to formally ask permission for the duel to continue. Joseph insists that Alicia's reputation cannot be ruined by a forfeit, though the opposition mocks him, pointing out there are no other knights left to fight. A smug lord declares that a duel is impossible under these conditions, but Joseph simply smiles and confidently states that he has a replacement ready. Joseph raises his voice to introduce Vlad of Suara, a young commoner vassal who stands holding a sword with quiet resolve. The opposing nobles slam their fists in outrage, shouting that a lowly commoner is completely unworthy of participating in a sacred duel. Joseph firmly counters that anyone who wields a sword can join a duel of honor, leaving his critics stuttering in anger. Joseph accuses the opposition of using shallow tricks that insult the nobility, putting his own high reputation on the line to vouch for Vlad. Reluctantly accepting the match, the opposing lord sneers at what a mere vassal could possibly achieve, while Vlad anxiously asks if he is actually expected to survive. Assuring the nervous boy that he will personally step in if things turn deadly, Joseph gives Vlad a reassuring look. When Vlad asks what happens if things just go moderately bad, Joseph ignores the query and calls him forward to prepare. Joseph grabs Vlad by the shoulders, silencing his stammering protests with an intense, steady gaze. Joseph tells Vlad to simply hang in there for 10 minutes, revealing that he has already dispatched an ally with secret orders to execute a backup plan. When Vlad nervously asks if 10 minutes will really be enough, Joseph replies that the more time he can buy, the better their chances. Nodding in quiet determination, Vlad accepts his task and steps out toward the arena, as Joseph bids him to be careful. Alicia watches from a distance as Vlad's boots click against the stone floor, his silhouette moving steadily toward the grand battlefield. Under the brilliant magical lights of the arena, Vlad draws his steel and introduces himself to his opponent, Sir Pablo. Pablo stares back with absolute disdain, spitting that a worthless brat is not even fit to hear his name, claiming the match has lost all its honor. As Pablo sneers, Vlad's eyes flare with an intense, quiet anger as he mutters how much he absolutely hates being dismissed as worthless. Looking at the grand architecture of the elite, Vlad questions why the nobleborn always get to hoard all the beautiful, shining things in the world. Admitting he may have come from a place of no worth, Vlad grips his hilt tightly, declaring he has no intention of ending up as a nobody. Pablo scoffs at the boy's defiance, muttering that the standard of their house has truly fallen to let such trash stand before him. Telling Vlad to throw everything he has into the fight, Pablo lunges forward, aiming to nip this foolish rebellion in the bud. Vlad exhales a sharp breath, his eyes locking onto the incoming blade as a massive shockwave erupts from their first explosive clash. Trading a flurry of high-speed strikes, Vlad is forced to grunt in pain as he barely manages to withstand the knight's heavy onslaught. Blades spark and scream against each other as Vlad fights with a new purpose, raising his sword not for his own sake, but to protect another's name. The crowd gasps at Vlad's incredible speed as he twirls his blade, releasing a brilliant wave of blue energy to push Pablo back. Pablo stabilizes his stance, recognizing Vlad's terrifying, instinctual talent as something akin to a starving wolf. Praising the boy's impressive spirit, Pablo charges once more, his face hardening as he prepares to show the gap between a squire and a true knight. A massive shockwave tears through the dirt as Pablo unleashes a devastating, heavy overhead swing. Vlad is sent sliding backward, his boots carving deep grooves in the stone as he barely deflects a flurry of follow-up attacks. His hands tremble from the sheer weight of the strikes, while Pablo asks with a cold grin if the boy is already out of clever tricks. With a roar of effort, Vlad throws himself forward into another high-stakes clash, his eyes burning with absolute focus. Vlad's allies scream from the sidelines, begging him not to block the knight's heavy blows head-on and to focus on parrying instead. Despite the warning, Vlad charges straight through a cloud of debris, delivering a striking blow that forces a grunt of pain from the heavily armored knight. Pablo backs away to regain his footing, genuinely impressed by the sheer grit of the kid standing before him. Pablo mutters that it is a shame they had to meet as enemies under these circumstances, inviting Vlad to seek him out if they both survive. Acknowledging the boy's hard work, Pablo steps back and raises his sword, channeling a terrifying amount of power into his blade. Vlad responds by unleashing his own blinding, brilliant blue slash that cuts straight through the heavy atmosphere of the arena. Onlookers rise from their seats in utter disbelief, recognizing the complex counterattack technique manifesting from the young commoner. A massive explosion rocks the arena floor as their swords collide, leaving the spectators whispering in absolute shock at what they are witnessing. Many dismiss it as a fluke, pointing out that the boy's arms are trembling so violently he can barely lift his weapon. Pablo firmly rejects the idea of a coincidence, knowing firsthand the immense, undeniable strength behind Vlad's strike. As Vlad stands in a daze, a spectator wonders if the boy has lost consciousness, or if he is simply lost in his own memories. With wide, unblinking eyes, Vlad looks down at his hands, completely consumed by the echo of his own past struggles. He remembers the bitter pain of being deemed unworthy, a boy left behind in the dark while others walked in the light. He recalls dreaming of a day when he would finally deserve to stand in that shining place, wielding a blade of true honor. Looking up at a grand, glowing city in his mind, Vlad's resolve solidifies into a burning, unstoppable desire to reach those heights. Standing amidst a broken world, he declares to himself that he will find a way to belong in that beautiful, shining light. Like a gorgeous flower blooming in secret, Vlad bursts forward, enveloped in a magnificent, roaring aura of bright blue energy. Their blades meet with a sickening crunch, leaving the crowd completely speechless as blood splatters across the dirt. An onlooker marvels at how quickly the boy applied the lesson, transforming a basic demonstration into a deadly, active combat tool. Though Vlad's blade has lost its clean sharpness, it is now driven by an unshakable, terrifyingly heavy will. A rival noble smiles with quiet amusement, wondering exactly what kind of future that stubborn will is fighting to create. The sheer force of Vlad's focus causes the surrounding air to hum, making his opponent wonder if the sword itself is crying out. Realizing that the boy's potential is actively blossoming, Pablo's eyes harden with a sudden, profound respect. Determined to fulfill his duty as a knight, Pablo unleashes a devastating, fully powered blue strike to meet Vlad's incoming charge. Pablo pushes his limits to drag out the full depth of Vlad's blooming power, welcoming the clash with open arms. A tremendous explosion of magical energy rips through the arena, forcing the spectators to shield their eyes from the blinding light. Fearing the absolute destruction of the incoming blow, Pablo desperately screams for his squires to bring him a shield. The panicked squires rush forward to obey as Vlad leaps through the air, his blade coming down like a falling star. Declaring his name to the heavens, Pablo braces behind his heavy defense, meeting the terrifying force of the strike head-on. Vlad pours every ounce of his soul into the swing to prove his worth, leaving the air thick with the sharp scent of burnt magic and ozone. The young warrior stands tall before the massive castle of the elite, having finally proven his worth to the entire world. With a final, deafening shout of his name, Vlad releases a massive, blinding column of blue light that consumes the battlefield. The ground shatters as Pablo is sent flying backward, completely overwhelmed by the sheer force of the commoner's strike. Panting heavily amidst the swirling dust, Vlad challenges his opponent to come at him with everything he has left. With a final surge of lightning-like energy, Vlad swings his glowing sword, initiating the absolute climax of the duel. A sudden, violent burst of raw energy forces everyone to their knees as Vlad's blood-soaked hands finally lose their grip on his hilt. Praising the boy for a job incredibly well done, Pablo stands over the unconscious, kneeling form of the brave young squire. The opposing nobles immediately point and shout in protest, claiming that Pablo's use of magical aura is a direct violation of the rules. Demanding his disqualification, ignoring the angry shouts, Pablo steps forward to clasp his hands in a respectful salute, thanking Vlad for a truly honorable battle. Pablo calmly states he merely did his duty as a knight, prompting the arena's priest to step forward to address the complicated situation. The crowd holds its breath as the priest ponders which virtue takes precedence, the strict rules of the duel or the sacred code of the swordmaster. The priest explains that the swordmaster's code requires a knight to protect and honor blooming talent, complicating the legal outcome. Because honor and duty are so deeply interlinked here, the priest officially postpones the final decision until it can be reported to the Holy See and the Crown. A respected lord watches the quiet arena, musing that all delicate young potential in this world deserves the chance to bloom and be protected. He reminds those who bear the swords of honor that it is their absolute duty to defend these precious moments of growth. As the legendary founding king once declared in his first code, true strength exists to foster the future, not to crush it. A glowing, ancient sword hums with power, sealing the sacred vow that will guide the destiny of all knights to come. Days later, Vlad slowly blinks open his eyes inside a quiet room, groaning in absolute agony as he weakly calls out for a cup of water. As cool liquid is poured, Vlad mutters that every single bone in his body feels utterly shattered, only to gasp in surprise when he sees who is tending to him. Joseph stands by his bedside with a warm smile, expressing his relief that the young warrior has finally regained his strength. Telling Vlad to make himself comfortable and ease his apologies, Joseph kindly asks if the boy is experiencing any lingering pain. Joseph admits he never imagined Vlad could achieve so much, thanking him for buying the precious time needed to postpone the duel without a devastating defeat. As Joseph explains how the situation grew complicated due to the swordmaster's code, Vlad quietly recalls a voice once telling him about this sacred law. He remembers being told that to become a true knight, one must make a solemn pledge under the code, promising that a day would come when Vlad would do the same. With a serious gaze, Vlad envisions himself as a proud, armored knight on horseback, determined to fully heal so he can finally claim his rightful place in the light. Joseph looks down at the recovering Vlad and resolves that he cannot let precious things be snuffed out, promising to protect those who deserve to exist. Joseph stands in quiet contemplation as he receives word that the visiting high society members are finally packing up and departing the estate. Alicia grinds her teeth in frustration that her enemies get to leave in peace, noting that the hostile Lord Andre has also cleared out now that the duel has been officially delayed. Alicia is advised by her elders to let go of her immediate anger, reminding her that these chaotic times are meant for building her own strength. She receives stern instructions to establish absolute control over her territory, a duty she solemnly vows to fulfill. The discussion shifts to local matters, revealing a troubling decline in Dearmar's vital lemon harvest. Alicia agrees to wait before restructuring their entire industry, sighing at how one massive hurdle is immediately replaced by another. Pushing past her exhaustion, Alicia suddenly turns to Sir Duncan to ask if riding a horse is a universal skill for all true knights. An astonished Duncan confirms that horsemanship is an absolute requirement, calling it a virtue just as critical as wielding a blade. Alicia falls silent, thoughtfully considering his words. Meanwhile, Vlad attempts to ride a horse and immediately gets launched into the air, causing immense distress to his trainers watching nearby. Rubbing his bruised backside, Vlad jokes about needing a prissier stallion, earning a swift, frustrated scolding from his training partner. Pushed back into the dirt, Vlad insists he successfully mounted a horse once before, which his fellow vassals reluctantly back up. Jaeger realizes the situation is dire, and wonders if teaching Vlad directly is failing because the beasts themselves are the issue. The trainers observe that even seasoned warhorses actively recoil from Vlad, sensing an overwhelming predator-like danger radiating from the boy. Deciding to call it a day, they agree to skip tomorrow's riding session, leaving a contemplative Vlad to wonder if a break is for the best. When told that their riding lessons are being put on hold, Vlad grumbles about how often he hears about delays, admitting he is a bit frustrated. Jaeger sighs that there is no fast solution and suggests they tackle the issue back in Sturma, leaving Vlad to head off to his daily duties. His companion questions why the beasts despise him so much, and jokingly suggests trying to ride a slow, dull cow instead. Vlad snaps at the teasing, while his friend tells him he might just be stuck riding in carriages for the rest of his life. As the horses are led away, Vlad gets told that his main issue might be that he simply moves too fast. Recognizing that sensitive animals detect his resting combat power, Vlad is advised to master his internal aura so he can suppress his intense momentum. Reminded not to run before he can walk, Vlad quietly agrees and prepares for their upcoming departure back to Sturma following tomorrow's farewell ceremony. Deep inside the castle, the forfeited proxy Joubert of Shahzad reflects on his failure, confident his master will understand the bizarre circumstances. Yet the memory of a lowly vassal blocking a knight's blade continues to gnaw at him as a completely absurd development. Joubert mutters in disgust, but his thoughts are cut short by the sound of approaching footsteps in the quiet hallway. Jaeger suddenly steps out of the shadows with steel drawn, prompting Joubert to mock the incredibly aggressive greeting. When asked why he is wasting his free day waiting around, Jaeger simply replies that he has the day off. Declaring that his day off is the perfect time to catch up on delayed business, Jaeger ignores Joubert's excuses about having no choice but to forfeit. Jaeger retorts that he lacks a choice as well, drawing his weapon while Joubert complains that fellow soldiers should show some professional understanding. With a sharp, purple flash, Joubert lunges forward, mockingly stating that as loyal hounds, they must bark whenever their master commands. The blades clash with blinding speed in the quiet corridor, their eyes locked in absolute, deadly concentration. Stepping back, Joubert spits that they are not true swordsmen, but merely trained beasts that only bite on command. Jaeger coldly tells him to enjoy his day off if he is done barking, leaving his opponent sweating from the sheer intensity of the exchange. Refusing to let the matter drop, Jaeger explodes forward with a heavy strike, forcing a painful groan from the purple-haired warrior. Pointing a glowing blade at his throat, Jaeger states his master is lenient, but he will not tolerate insults, leaving his beaten foe to bitterly remark on his luck. Jaeger denies any luck as he delivers a brutal, crushing blow that sends his opponent crashing hard against the masonry. Spitting blood and gasping for air, the defeated warrior struggles to stand under Jaeger's cold, menacing glare. Jaeger hopes they cross paths again on a real battlefield, noting that this brief beating does not even begin to cover the price of mocking his lord. Wiping the blood from his mouth, the beaten knight warns that the entire empire is fracturing, making forced alliances inevitable. As Jaeger turns to leave, both warriors acknowledge that a dark era is approaching where their deadly skills will be needed more than ever. A vision of a chaotic, burning battlefield flashes in their minds, symbolizing the impending war. Before leaving the estate, Vlad sneaks out to a massive ancient tree, eager to pay a quick visit and slip away before encountering Lady Alicia. As he approaches, a strange, bright blue magical light flares in his eyes, signaling the awakening of a spiritual entity. Vlad is suddenly knocked off his feet as a massive, serpentine white spirit emerges from the branches, leaving him to nervously ask if the beast is truly friendly. Bracing himself against the powerful magical wind, the young squire tries to convince himself that the creature's aggressive display is just a warm hello. The giant white spirit looms over Vlad with glowing eyes, letting out a deafening roar before settling into a peaceful, calm stare. Recalling that mortals cannot fully comprehend the ancient forces of nature, Vlad stands quietly as the spirit's ethereal energy wraps around him. A brilliant, magical blue light erupts from the grass, channeling ancient power directly into Vlad's body. Gripping his sword, Vlad gasps as a gentle, incredibly warm sensation flows down the length of his steel. Vlad looks on in absolute wonder as the glowing energy completely envelops his blade. The power peaks with a sudden, silent burst of light, bestowing the legendary spirit's blessing onto the young commoner's sword. The next morning, the local lord apologetically bids farewell to the Bayezid delegation, lamenting that they could not host a grand banquet to celebrate. Joseph assures him that their warm hospitality was more than enough, while Lady Alicia politely offers her gratitude to the northern delegation. Before they can depart, Alicia speaks up and asks them to wait a moment, catching a surprised Vlad completely off guard. The onlookers realize the hosts have prepared a formal ceremony, even though Alicia had requested a simple send-off. Alicia commands Vlad to kneel before her, looking him dead in the eye, to express her profound, heartfelt gratitude for saving her life and status. She declares that no amount of thanks could ever repay how he bravely protected her family's honor and exposed a fraudulent plot, declaring him more honorable than any formal knight. Alicia reaches into a silk pouch and hands her personal handkerchief directly to the kneeling boy. Watching the exchange, Joseph notes that Alicia is incredibly clever, using this public display of gratitude to secure her political ties to Bayezid. Staring at the expensive silk, Vlad recalls that proper etiquette demands he accept any noble's gift, remembering the harsh scolding he got for once refusing peanuts. Determined to avoid another painful lecture, Vlad quickly accepts the token with a respectful thank you. A collective gasp echoes through the crowd as onlookers facepalm in utter shock, realizing the young commoner has just broken a major protocol. An elder explains that a lady only passes her handkerchief of honor in two ways, by draping it on a sword or handing it directly to her lover. Because they bypassed the blade and passed it hand to hand, the act has accidentally symbolized a deep, romantic confession. An incredibly awkward silence blankets the plaza, leaving both Alicia and Vlad standing frozen as red blushes creep up their faces. Trying to break the tension, Vlad awkwardly promises to use the handkerchief well, only to make the onlookers groan even harder at his cluelessness. After they finally escape the plaza, a red-faced Vlad apologizes to Jaeger, who angrily commands him to look to his trainers for guidance before accepting noble gifts. Jaeger explains that despite the colossal misunderstanding, Vlad has officially been elevated to the prestigious status of an honorary knight. Vlad stammers in disbelief, while Jaeger explains that he will now be afforded the full respect of a true knight wherever Alicia's name carries weight. Clutching the silk, Vlad realizes the title is currently limited to Dearmar, sighing that climbing the social ladder is never going to be that simple. Joseph sternly warns Vlad that even if the gift was a mistake, he must protect it with his life, as it represents the literal honor of her house. When Vlad nervously asks what happens if he loses the token, Joseph coldly states he will be left to face the ruinous consequences completely alone. Reading the dark look in his benefactor's eyes, Vlad quickly clutches the silk tightly to his chest and vows never to let it leave his sight. Joseph then brings up the absurd financial details that secured their political leverage behind the scenes. Vlad's eyes nearly pop out of his head as Joseph mentions a massive 10,000 gold promissory note Alicia signed to secure military protection. Joseph explains that Alicia would have been forced to surrender herself to Lord Andre to save her people if she had lost, though the massive loan was just a tactical bluff. Joseph teaches the young commoner that a political cause is like a hidden spark in the ashes, requiring only a single strong gust of wind to flare back to life. Vlad looks on thoughtfully, finally beginning to understand the complex, chess-like justifications nobles use to survive. Suddenly, Vlad tenses up, his senses screaming as they travel through a quiet, lush valley. A thunderous roar of approaching footsteps echoes across the hills, catching Vlad completely by surprise. A massive crowd of armed men storms down the grassy slope, prompting Vlad to draw his blade as he warns of a surprise bandit ambush. Joseph calmly tells Vlad to put his sword away, revealing that he had already made special preparations to deal with this threat long before the duel even began. The bandits are instantly decimated in a flash of steel, and a powerful silver-haired warrior steps forward to apologize for arriving late. Joseph warmly greets the commander, praising his elite squad for executing their mission flawlessly. The scarred commander locks his intense gaze onto Vlad, questioning if this is the famous commoner who captured Alicia's honor. Joseph confirms the boy's identity, leaving the seasoned warrior to inspect Vlad with deep interest. Shaking his head, the commander notes that the resting energy radiating from Vlad is completely different from any ordinary knight. His combat instincts scream a warning, realizing the young boy standing before him possesses a terrifying, lethal potential that should never be trifled with. Offering to escort them back to Sturma, the squad prepares to move out as Joseph thanks them for their swift, flawless execution. The commander bows, stating he was simply fulfilling his sacred duty as the hidden vanguard of their house. Intrigued by the title of Hidden Sword, Vlad points to a large, mysterious black sack the soldiers are carrying. The commander gives a dark, knowing smile and explains that the sack contains the harsh, unforgiving reality of high-ranking politics. Joseph looks on in grim silence, fully aware of the heavy price paid to secure their victory. Back in Sturma, the regional leaders discuss reports of a quiet group of religious pilgrims passing through to view the legendary Dragon's Trail. The High Lord notes that these silent travelers represent the will of ancient gods who ask for absolutely nothing in return. They decide to quietly watch over the pilgrims from a distance to ensure their safety, acknowledging that everyone has a right to enjoy what they deserve. The Lord eagerly discusses the reports of Joseph and Vlad's massive success. Admitting the details of the duel made his old heart skip a beat. He reflects on how their strict, elite education rarely required invoking the historical first code, making Vlad's raw achievement incredibly unique. The elders agree that seeing a commoner break through so spectacularly is a rare marvel, wishing they could have witnessed the spectacular display in person. With a proud laugh, the Lord remarks that this incredible display, signaling a new golden generation, will bring the retired masters back out to spoil the newcomers. He notes that, though Vlad was pushed to absolute exhaustion, the boy literally crawled through the mud to bring home a shining, brilliant victory. Yet, the heavy reality remains that when the time comes, only one successor can formally claim the house's lead. Meanwhile, gossip spreads like wildfire through the local barracks, with commoners whispering about the rumor that Vlad actually dueled a true knight. Many dismiss the news as absolute madness, refusing to believe a rootless street urchin could possibly manifest advanced magical aura. Vlad casually strolls back into the main courtyard after a month away, rubbing his stomach in desperate search of a warm meal. Feeling the sudden weight of dozens of staring eyes, the returning squire halts in confusion. The local youths realize their petty squabbles over common versus noble status are officially over, as Vlad has completely rewritten the hierarchy. Standing amidst the stunned crowd, the blonde-haired hero shines with an undeniable, quiet presence of a true warrior. Sitting in the dining hall, Vlad complains that the endless, burning stares from the other trainees make it nearly impossible to enjoy his food. Vordan chuckles and warns him that news of his spectacular performance has already spread, meaning he will have to get used to the heavy attention. Vordan then asks what Vlad plans to do with his upcoming vacation, explaining that all vassals receive a week off twice a year. Astounded to hear he gets a break as well, Vlad is immediately invited by Vordan to spend the holiday at his family's grand estate. Vordan excitedly promises elite hospitality, remembering that Vlad is desperately looking for a personal steed. He assures Vlad that his region breeds elite stallions with bloodlines far superior to Jaeger's horse, practically guaranteeing they will find a match. Vlad's eyes light up with sudden excitement, and he vows to secure his vacation at all costs to go horse hunting. Later that day, Vlad throws himself into a fierce wooden sword sparring session with Jaeger, trying desperately to manifest his aura. Easily deflecting the clumsy attempt, Jaeger sternly tells Vlad to keep his eyes focused on the basics. They trade high-speed wooden strikes, with Jaeger effortlessly reading Vlad's overly ambitious movements. Vlad is sent sliding across the stone floor as a heavy, crushing parry rattles his bones. Spitting a grunt of pain, Vlad is harshly lectured by his mentor for attempting complex skills that his body is not yet ready to handle. Refusing to stay down, Vlad aggressively slides back into a defensive stance, his eyes blazing with stubborn defiance. Jaeger's face darkens as he demands to know if his instructions have become a joke, leaving Vlad to stammer in sudden guilt. Shrinking under the cold gaze of his direct instructor, Vlad lowers his practice blade and offers a quiet, sincere apology. Stepping away, Jaeger coldly tells him not to return if he feels forced to train, dismissing him from the courtyard with a quiet wave. While Jaeger respects Vlad's bright achievements, he privately notes that the boy's current skills are as unstable as loose sand on a beach. Without a solid foundation, his rapid growth is incredibly precarious, risk-prone to being instantly swept away by any true combat wave. Sighing at the harsh dismissal, Vlad looks down at his hands, realizing he rushed to manifest his aura out of a desperate desire to feel that power again. He reminds himself that while many elite knights cannot utilize aura, they are still formidable, structurally sound warriors. Recognizing that aura is merely a tool to rise higher, Vlad accepts that beautiful flowers can only bloom on top of an incredibly solid foundation. Vlad lets out a heavy breath, knowing Jaeger only gets angry because he expects greatness, realizing this cold look in his eyes is far worse than any mockery. Facing his mentor's deep disappointment hurts more than being battered by a wooden sword, leaving him feeling utterly dejected. Realizing he lost his chance to ask for the vacation after making such a mess, Vlad sighs and decides to forget about the trip. Standing alone in the dark, Vlad resolves to swing his sword until his mind goes completely blank, dedicating his break to building the foundation he desperately needs. Under the bright full moon, the quiet courtyard fills with the sharp, rhythmic swoosh of Vlad's blade, his heavy breathing echoing into the night. Under the pale moonlight, Vlad unleashes a brutal torrent of slashes, swinging his practice sword with desperate, exhausted fury. As his heavy breaths mist in the cold air, Vlad is forced to a halt as a magical circle glows beneath his feet. Vlad is told that he has already met his training quota for the day, and warning him that pushing himself to the brink will only break his body and waste all his hard work. Vlad quietly stares at his hands, reflecting on the fact that he has finally managed to grasp his own shining potential. The lone wolf continues to chase after the distant moon, refusing to let his hard-won progress slip away. While the world once enjoyed a fleeting era of peace, observers watch the boy's endless drive with a mixture of respect and concern. A massive explosion suddenly tears through the dark, cloudy sky, signaling a violent turn of events. A destructive sea of fire and embers completely consumes the county of Ravnoma, Trinova, as agonized screams of pain echo through the night. Inside a grand cathedral, several defeated warriors lay in pools of their own blood, completely devastated after a brutal, swift battle. Godin walks slowly among the fallen, commenting on how the lead knight was doing his best to complete his final mission. Staring at the carnage, Godin notes that the tragic outcome was inevitable in the end. A lone, defiant warrior stands to face his executioner, declaring that a knight should never blindly follow a lord's orders at the expense of their own honor. Godin replies that because Count Gaidar's knights stubbornly clung to such rigid ideals in the past, they all met a swift and bloody end. Bracing for the final strike, the dying knight spits Godin's name, telling him to deliver a final message to Count Gaidar. The knight fiercely declares that he will be waiting for the Count in hell, while Godin coldly accepts the warning before delivering the killing blow. The bloody clash reaches its grim conclusion as the last resistance in the county is completely snuffed out. Back in Sturma, Vlad is pleasantly surprised when Joseph formally brings up the topic of his upcoming vacation. Joseph chuckles at how fast rumors travel, asking Vlad if it is true that he was personally invited to the house of Canner. Joseph reassures the boy that he was already planning to grant him some well-deserved time off, leaving Vlad to stare in quiet determination. Joseph notices the lingering, awkward silence between Vlad and Jaeger, realizing that something significant must have transpired during their training. Though he could easily step in to ease the tension, Joseph decides to respect their relationship and let them resolve it on their own terms. Vlad politely addresses Jaeger, waiting to hear what his stern instructor has to say about his departure. Jaeger warns him that skipping a single day of practice will show, and a week of slacking off will be obvious to everyone, though he knows Vlad is not one to easily stray. Jaeger promises to properly test Vlad's skills the moment he returns, prompting an eager, confident salute from the young vassal. Even so, Jaeger advises Vlad not to get his hopes too high about finding a suitable steed, pointing out that his horse riding problem is exceptionally difficult to solve. He instructs Vlad to simply test the exact threshold of how much the horses reject him, dismissing the boy and telling him they will meet again in a week. With a respectful bow, Vlad promises to keep his mentor's instructions close to his heart as he prepares to take his leave. As the doors close, Jaeger and Joseph quietly discuss the house of Canner, noting that if things go well, Vlad will likely meet several influential figures. They acknowledge that Vlad stands out far too much, prompting Jaeger to thoughtfully ponder if the other noble houses will try to recruit the boy. Jaeger narrows his eyes, firmly declaring that he does not have the slightest intention of giving his talented student away to anyone. Vlad stands in a fitting room, wondering why he was brought here, as Mrs. Oksana admires how well the new armor suit fits him. Oksana praises his sturdy build, while a flustered Vlad offers his sincere thanks for her generosity. She reminds Vlad that since he is visiting a prestigious house, he must look absolutely polished to avoid bringing shame and criticism to his benefactors. Oksana commands Vlad not to let anyone criticize her taste, leaving the young warrior to stare back in serious silence. Looking at the elegant woman, Vlad swallows his protests and promises to behave with absolute decorum during his trip. Oksana promises to secure a proper noble tutor for Vlad after his vacation, reminding him that his new rank of honorary knight requires him to act accordingly. She then presents Vlad with a woven basket of fresh lemons that Joseph brought back, telling him it is bad manners to visit someone's estate empty-handed. Vlad expresses his deep gratitude for her thoughtful consideration, and she bids him to have a wonderful, safe break before he sets off. Stepping out onto the road, Vlad admits to his companion that he feels incredibly out of place in his refined new gear. He sighs that he feels like he is wearing clothes that simply do not suit his station, his thoughts suddenly drifting back to his hometown. Vlad wonders how his childhood friend Zemina is doing, hoping she is safe now that she has entered into a holy covenant. He mutters that she is likely struggling to adapt to an unfamiliar, rigid new environment just like him. In a bustling temple courtyard, young recruits gossip about a brilliant, handsome blonde vassal in the house of Bayezid who can draw out aura at a young age. Zemina quietly listens to the rumors, immediately suspecting the mysterious, talented youth might be her childhood friend. Smiling softly to herself, Zemina dismisses the idea that Vlad could already be doing that well, simply wishing that he remains healthy and safe. Her peaceful thoughts are shattered as a harsh supervisor barks at her, demanding she work off her support debt rather than slacking off. Told she has no home to return to, Zemina is ordered to finish her chores before lunch, leaving her to quietly carry out the physical labor. Inside the main temple, a furious debate erupts as elite authorities declare that not just anyone can join their holy covenant. They refuse to allow girls from filthy slums into their sacred ranks, despite an angry benefactor shouting that he has donated massive fortunes to secure their entry. The benefactor demands to know why they are being rejected, leaving the temple guards to stand in tense silence. The authorities permit the young girls to enter the archway, but coldly halt a dark-haired woman, Marcella, from joining them. Marcella looks on with a resigned expression, pleading with the priest to at least take proper care of the young children she brought. Suddenly, a group of hostile guards surround her in the snow, screaming that they have finally caught her. Marcella is brutally tackled and struck by the aggressive men, prompting a horrified Zemina to scream for them to stop. Zemina watches in absolute, helpless horror as Marcella is violently beaten right before her eyes. Left kneeling in the cold snow, Zemina weeps in deep, agonizing despair, desperately whispering Vlad's name. Meanwhile, Vlad finally arrives at the massive estate of the House of Canner, staring in absolute awe at the humongous structure looming before him. Vorden warmly welcomes him back, prompting an excited shout of greeting from the young butler who has deeply missed him. Vlad asks about the family head and is told that while the Lord is currently greeting sudden guests, Vlad should take a look at their proud ranch. Vlad readily agrees, expressing great expectations to see the legendary horses the family breeds. The ranch hands guide him through the estate, promising to show him the finest selections after the Lord finishes his business. Vlad tries to approach the animals, only to watch in horror as horses, cows, and even sheep violently stampede away from him in sheer terror. Vlad is left standing in an empty field, utterly defeated as his powerful resting aura scares away every single beast on the ranch. Clutching his head, Vlad laments that he cannot even ride a cow or a sheep, realizing just how serious his mount problem truly is. He groans that he is not cursed and was even vouched for by a priest, staring out at the vast fields in complete despair. Vlad complains that his hard-won aura is useless if he is left eating his allies' dust while everyone else rides gloriously into battle. Vorden desperately tries to calm him down, promising to show him every single breed on the ranch until they find the one perfect horse for him. Vlad asks if such a horse even exists, prompting Vorden to describe a legendary steed of stellar bloodline that his father recently brought to the estate. Their discussion is cut short as a massive, fiery explosion of red energy erupts from a nearby training courtyard. Peering through the smoke, Vlad and Vorden are greeted by the confident, booming voice of the family head, Olsen Canor. Olsen apologizes for the delay, while Vlad politely introduces himself as Jaeger's loyal vassal. Olsen laughs heartily, offering a warm welcome to the young hero who has become the absolute pride of Sturma. He praises his son for making such a magnificent friend, looking at the young boy who invoked the historic code for the first time in an age. Olsen ushers them inside for a grand dinner, while Vlad remembers that the estate is currently hosting other noble guests. Vlad is initially pleased to hear the guests are from Bayezid, but he freezes in absolute shock as he enters the grand dining hall. Staring across the opulent room, Vlad finds himself face to face with Knight Rudiger, the very man whose kindness he had previously snubbed. An elegant hand channels orange magical energy as Rudiger asks with a calm smile if Vlad has been keeping well. Vlad nervously mutters, "Rudiger's name," while the knight chuckles that the prepared feast is far too grand for Vlad to turn him down again. Sweat dripping down his face, Vlad realizes he has completely landed on the wrong side of the territory's elite. Vlad internally panics, remembering how he rejected Rudiger's previous offer and proceeded to beat up several of the knight's direct vassals. Determined not to be intimidated, Vlad steels his resolve and declares that he is actually looking forward to dining together. Surprised by the boy's grit, Rudiger invites Vlad to join him on an excursion tomorrow morning, asking him to come along to a special location. The next morning, Vlad finds himself riding in a bumpy wooden carriage across a vast, sunlit open field. As the carriage jolts, a sharp voice demands to know why Vlad keeps staring, asking if he has never seen a werebeast of the Ruga race before. Vlad calmly replies that there is a first time for everything, prompting Dorothea to ask how a backstreet urchin from Suara managed to become a Bayezid vassal. Vlad dismisses the question, but Dorothea presses him, asking if it is true that he can draw out advanced aura. She mocks him relentlessly, questioning how someone with such powerful aura is completely incapable of riding a simple horse. Vlad grumbles that life is full of unexpected twists, internally lamenting that his uncalled-for vacation has turned into a massive headache. He asks Dorothea why they are suddenly going falconry hunting, prompting her to stare back with an annoyed expression. As Vlad wonders if all werebeasts are this talkative, Rudiger rides up and commands Dorothea to stop digging into the boy's past. Dorothea teaches an annoyance, while Rudiger leads the party to a high cliff edge, declaring that their hunt will begin from here. Vlad narrows his eyes, realizing the knights are not actually planning on hunting, as they have not even taken the falcon out of its cage. A scout points toward the plain, and Rudiger smiles, noting how incredibly lucky they are to spot a group of traveling pilgrims in the distance. Rudiger commands his men to raise their banners to signal their peaceful intentions, ensuring the pilgrims do not feel unsafe on their journey. With their presence known, the party prepares to search for their target on the grassy plain below. Suddenly, the peaceful scenery is shattered as a massive tremor shakes the earth, causing a large herd of wild beasts to panic. Vlad watches the frantic movement, noting that the knights' behavior makes it obvious that they are acting as an armed escort. The carriage violently shakes as Dorothea asks Vlad if he is about to vomit from the rough ride. Vlad insists he is fine, though he admits his heart is pounding rapidly from the stunning, wide view of the meadows stretching before them. Vordan explains that the massive plain connects all the way to Varna, noting that the region has been incredibly safe this year thanks to Joseph's efforts. Hearing this, Vlad smiles softly, realizing that his own winter hunt means he has a personal stake in protecting this beautiful landscape. His peace is instantly shattered as a thunderous rumble shakes the ground, leaving Vlad to gasp in surprise. A powerful shockwave erupts as Vlad clutches his chest, confused by the sudden, intense thumping of his heart. Bracing himself, Vlad looks out to see a massive herd of wild horses running frantically across the plain. The knights observe the stampede, with Rudiger pointing out how incredibly strange it is for the herd to be moving south instead of heading north for the green season. The massive stampede accelerates at a terrifying speed, prompting the knights to draw their weapons as they realize the danger. Vlad grunts in pain as the intense pressure of the stampede makes his heart race, while Dorothea looks on in sudden fear. When a scout screams that they are experiencing an earthquake, Rudiger coldly corrects him, stating that this is something far more dangerous. Rudiger locks his gaze onto the stampeding herd, his face hardening as he prepares his men to protect the vulnerable pilgrims. As the ground splits open, Vlad realizes they are facing a death worm, one of the terrifying ancient remnants of the fallen dragon. The monstrous creature bursts from the earth with a gaping mouth, unleashing a devastating wave of kinetic force. The knights scream to hold the line as Dorothea warns that something is deeply wrong with the beast's movements. As wounded soldiers scream in agony, the pink, bloodthirsty monster thrashes wildly, tearing up the grassy fields. The creature prepares to launch another devastating attack, its massive head glowing with volatile energy. A scout panics, shouting that the stampeding wild horses have just steered directly toward the defenseless pilgrims. To make matters worse, the massive deathworm turns its blind gaze directly toward the holy travelers, threatening to crush them. Rudiger aggressively commands his squad forward, demanding that Dorothea explain exactly what senses the blind monster uses to hunt. Dorothea explains that deathworms have absolutely no eyes or ears, leaving them to rely entirely on ground vibrations and magic. Rudiger commands Vlad to take Dorothea to high ground, ordering him to signal the squad the moment they find a way to draw the beast's attention. Vlad shouts his understanding, while Rudiger draws his massive sword and commands the rest of his knights to brace themselves. Rudiger yells that it does not matter if the situation makes sense, reminding his men that their absolute duty is to fulfill the mission given by the Count. He orders them to protect the pilgrims at all costs, launching a flurry of glowing magical blades to halt the monster's advance. The knights charge fiercely behind Rudiger, while Vlad thoughtfully observes the chaotic battle from a distance. Vlad notes that the bizarre timing of the stampede suggests an unnatural, hostile force is deliberately pulling the strings behind the scenes. As the knights trade heavy blows with the beast, Rudiger grunts in exertion, angered by the sheer audacity of those who dare plot on Bayezid territory. A massive explosion of fire and sword strikes dominates the field, turning the beautiful meadows into a brutal, high-stakes war zone. From their high vantage point on the cliff, Vlad and Dorothea look down at the chaotic clash, desperately searching for a way to turn the tide. High on the cliffside, Dorothea frantically filters through her memories to recall the exact color of the marking spell needed to track vibrations. This marking technique utilizes a divine secret that forms a perfect trinity by combining pure divinity with a warrior's active aura. Vlad watches in awe as a colossal, blinding flash of energy erupts across the plain below. Deeply shocked by the explosive shockwave, the young squire realizes the sheer magnitude of the magical firepower lighting up the battlefield. Onlookers identify the source of the attack as Rudiger, whose jaw-dropping martial display leaves Vlad completely staggered. Vlad quickly realizes the initial strike was not enough to put the beast down, because Rudiger was not fully prepared for the creature's immense durability. Charging through the smoke, Rudiger grunts in frustration, acknowledging that they are dealing with the absolute hardest of dragon remnants. The massive beast thrashes wildly through the dirt, roaring in fury as a flurry of high-speed sword slashes cut into its thick hide. Rudiger pivots dynamically, channeling a massive overhead swing that shatters the ground with a thunderous boom. Despite the heavy impact, the thrashing dragon remnant refuses to go down, kicking up massive clouds of debris as the combat intensifies. A panicked soldier screams to ask if Rudiger is okay, but the seasoned knight yells back to hold the line if the situation gets incredibly complicated. He commands his squad to hunt down the threat immediately, leading his mounted knights into a fast-paced charge. A scout alerts the squad that the rampaging deathworm is heading straight for the pilgrims, prompting Rudiger to draw his sword and sprint to intercept it. High on the cliff edge, Vlad desperately urges Dorothea to hurry up, asking if she is seriously playing games at a time like this. Dorothea fiercely snaps back that she is not playing around, revealing a unique, glowing werebeast marking method as her hands hum with magical energy. Telling Vlad that she was already finishing up, she hands over the completed marking script and instructs him to rub or tear the paper to trigger the lure. Exhausted and barely able to stand after exhausting her mana on the spell, Dorothea grumbles that since the blonde kid cannot ride a horse, it is up to Vlad to carry out the dangerous plan. Seeing the magical paper glow, Vlad locks his eyes on the target below, realizing this risky bait maneuver is their absolute last resort. Bracing his body, Vlad activates his aura and prepares to take action, leaving a terrified Dorothea to scream and ask what on earth he is planning to do. Dorothea shrieks and calls him a complete lunatic, yelling that the drop below is practically a vertical cliff. Without hesitating, Vlad dives headfirst over the massive drop, knowing that Rudiger's elite forces should not have to fight this battle alone. Though he knows he is a mere vassal, Vlad plunges through the air as the massive, thrashing dragon remnant thrashes on the plain below. Vlad is driven forward by a deep, unshakable memory that hums down to his very bones. He remembers the agonizing pain of having his original home destroyed by a massive, uncaring world, fueling a ferocious desire to protect the innocent. Focusing every ounce of his strength into his toes, Vlad braces his body as he hurtles rapidly toward the grassy ground. Sparks fly as Vlad hits the dirt, grunting in pain as he barely manages to withstand the terrifying momentum of the fall. Vlad curls his body and rolls desperately across the field, taking a heavy tumble before finally coming to a halt. As the dust settles, Dorothea peers over the cliff in shock, while Vlad slowly stands up, thoroughly surprised that his body feels completely fine. Vlad brushes off the dirt and smiles, realizing that he managed to survive the deadly drop without breaking a single bone. Looking down at his hands, Vlad feels an ancient, glowing magical energy wrapping around his body to form an active shield. Vlad realizes this protective power is the spirit's blessing, declaring how awesome the magical armor feels as he readies his sword. Knowing they have a fighting chance, Vlad charges forward through the meadows to intercept the approaching threat. Looking toward the horizon, he spots a group of robed pilgrims desperately pulling their wooden cart across the field. A loud boom echoes as Vlad realizes with a jolt of shock that the leader of the pilgrims is guiding them directly into the path of danger. Looking around in panic, Vlad screams to ask where Rudiger is, realizing the distance is too vast and the deathworm will reach the travelers first. Understanding that the high priest is in imminent danger, Vlad grips his marking paper and prepares to trigger the vibration lure. Accepting that fate has forced a heavy choice upon him, Vlad declares that he has absolutely no time to hesitate. Vlad tightly grips the hilt of his sword, focusing his entire mind on the crucial action he must take right now. Staring down the monstrous enemy with absolute, unblinking determination, Vlad vows not to falter for even a single second. With a powerful shout, Vlad unleashes a massive burst of blue spiritual energy, swinging his glowing blade to command the beast's attention. A colossal explosion of blue light rocks the field as Vlad roars a challenge to the giant monster, holding his glowing sword high. Enveloped in a swirling vortex of water and energy, the young warrior stands firm as the magical power peaks around him. Vlad commands the pilgrims to run, muttering that his current power is not yet enough to completely turn the tide. Vlad is urged to amplify the deep vibrations of his steel, calling upon his internal world to manifest a dark, protective wing. A massive blast of blue energy shatters the landscape, wrapping Vlad in a spectacular display of light as he commands the dragon remnant to look at him. The ancient, blind monster turns its massive jaws toward the intense, blazing source of magical light. Vlad hovers in a brilliant pillar of blue energy, preparing to clash with the charging beast as the final confrontation begins. The massive dragon remnant lunges forward with a deafening, terrifying roar, snapping its massive jaws in a bid to crush the challenger. Vlad barely avoids a crushing bite, sliding under the creature's massive snout as a powerful kinetic shockwave detonates around him. Unleashing a series of swift, blue slashes, Vlad is urged by his allies not to fight the beast head-on and to stand back. Told that merely keeping the monster occupied is more than enough, Vlad grits his teeth and scans the empty meadows for his next move. Leaping backward, Vlad lands heavily on the grass as another explosive tremor shakes the field. Vlad is sent tumbling across the dirt as the thrashing tail of the beast narrowly misses his position. Vlad grunts in pain as the massive deathworm suddenly dives back underground, leaving a massive crater in its wake. Looking desperately left and right as the earth shakes, Vlad panics, realizing the burrowing monster is heading straight for the pilgrims once more. Suddenly, Rudiger charges into the fray, his blade glowing with intense energy as he delivers a rapid flurry of strikes to intercept the beast. The knights scream for the travelers to dodge as a massive blast of magical energy detonates across the plain. A knight screams in horror as the giant, scaled monster thrashes violently through the dust, threatening to overrun their defensive line. The scaled beast thrashes wildly, while Rudiger and his allies brace themselves for a devastating impact. Amidst the swirling dust, Vlad is utterly shocked to see a massive black stallion standing calmly before him. Looking closely at the animal's forehead, Vlad's spiritual vision flares as he realizes the creature is actually an ancient nature spirit. Because the horse is a pure spirit rather than a biological beast, it does not fear Vlad's volatile aura, allowing him to mount the majestic steed. Leaping onto the saddle, Vlad laughs with pure unbridled joy as the powerful horse gallops across the open field at an incredible speed. Smiling widely under the bright blue sky, Vlad marvels at the magnificent view of the world from atop a horse. Vlad unleashes a brilliant wave of energy from his sword, completely thrilled by the incredible power of their synchronized charge. A teammate screams Vlad's name as they check on each other, deeply moved by the squire's spectacular return to the battlefield. Rudiger observes the boy in silence, deeply impressed that this young vassal has just acted out the selfless values of the Swordmaster's code with his entire being. A completely stunned teammate asks Vlad if he can actually control the majestic spirit mount as they prepare for the next phase of the battle. Vlad declares that they must kill the deathworm to keep the pilgrims safe, and Rudiger confidently assures him that he is fully capable of doing so. Vlad prepares to execute the plan, knowing Dorothea's marking and his new spirit mount will allow him to successfully lure the beast. Looking down at his horse, Vlad realizes they are both running to protect their own herds, locking eyes with a shared, determined purpose. Vowing to protect the horses and his friends, Vlad raises his sword and confidently declares that they are ready to do this. Rudiger commands Vlad to loop around the hill and draw the target, and Vlad shouts his understanding as he charges forward. Swinging his sword to activate the tracking vibrations, Vlad looks back to confirm the monstrous beast is trailing right behind him. The earth splits open as the giant worm pursues them, leaving the watching knights completely astonished by Vlad's incredible boost in riding speed. The scouts watch the spectacular chase unfold across the horizon, marveling at the sheer talent of the young vassal. Vlad lowers his sword, letting the marking's deep vibrations echo through the ground to keep the blind monster locked onto his path. The monstrous creature thrashes violently behind them, unleashing a massive shockwave as it lunges toward the bait. Rudiger charges into position with his glowing sword, bracing himself as the ancient dragon remnant looms over the field. With the target successfully lured away, Rudiger commands his men to move the pilgrims to safety and prepare for any emergency. The soldiers shout their understanding, while the massive beast thrashes in the distance as Rudiger prepares his final strike. Rudiger stands alone before the monster, his blade erupting with a brilliant, white-hot magical flame. A massive explosion of fiery energy consumes the plain, turning the dark sky into a roaring sea of orange light. Vlad looks on in complete awe as the colossal blast of heat and kinetic force completely overwhelms the target. Vlad realizes that Rudiger has temporarily expanded his internal combat world, a legendary technique only mastered by elite knights. He declares that Rudiger is a far more exceptional knight than they ever imagined, watching the massive broadsword burn with unyielding flames. Vlad notes that the sheer, ferocious power of Rudiger's expanded world could easily burn an ordinary warrior's mind to ashes. Rudiger delivers a series of devastating heavy slashes, cutting deep into the thrashing beast with absolute authority. The thrashed monster recoils in agony, as its senses are completely overwhelmed by the intense heat of Rudiger's domain. Rudiger curses as he prepares another strike, while the scouts shout in alarm as they watch the high-stakes battle unfold. A mounted knight yells to ask where Vlad is going as the boy charges his stallion directly into the fray to assist. Enveloped in glowing blue energy, Vlad executes a flawless leap to deliver a powerful follow-up strike alongside Rudiger. Their combined forces resonate with the White Snake's blessing, unleashing a colossal wave of blue magical energy that completely paralyzes the beast. The monster roars in pain as the devastating, synchronized strike lands with pinpoint accuracy. Rudiger yells to finish the fight, charging forward alongside the unmounted knight to deliver the final blow. Like a brilliant white star piercing through a pitch-black night sky, their combined steel cuts straight through the ancient dragon remnant. The massive beast is sent crashing to the dirt with a final, agonizing shriek as Rudiger's powerful world continues to incinerate the surrounding area. Vlad grunts in exhaustion as he stabilizes his horse, while the dust slowly begins to settle over the battle-scarred plain. The remaining soldiers secure the area, praising their commanders for refusing to give up in the face of such a terrifying threat. Rudiger and Vlad exchange a nod of deep, mutual respect, their faces covered in sweat and grime after the intense clash. Rudiger calls out to the young boy, offering a rare smile of genuine commendation for his incredible bravery. He praises Vlad for a job well done and declares that it is his turn to formally claim the victory for the territory. Holding his glowing sword, Rudiger proudly declares that this is Bayezid's territory, a land where chaos shall never be brought by outside forces. With a final, roaring overhead swing, Rudiger channels the full weight of his flames to completely incinerate the fallen threat. He commands the beast to be gone, unleashing a massive, blinding firestorm that turns the remains of the death worm to absolute ash. The intense, magical flames light up the hills, leaving Vlad to stare in absolute silent wonder at the sheer majesty of a true knight's world. The soldiers cheer as the threat is completely neutralized, while Vlad reflects on how far the world of an elite knight is from common sense. Staring at the glowing embers, Vlad muses that watching a true knight's expanded world feels like looking up at a mountain that stretches to infinity. He wonders if other elite masters like Godin, Sir Jaeger, or Sir Pablo can unleash this level of power, asking himself if he can ever hope to reach such heights. He realizes that to achieve this, his internal world must become so unshakable that absolutely nothing in the universe can cause it to waver. Vlad stands quietly next to his majestic spirit horse, watching the residual flames slowly fade over the blackened hills. A companion walks up to ask if he is okay, and Vlad weakly smiles, jokingly asking if all this fire is going to burn down the entire grassland. His ally reassures him that the moist grass will prevent the fire from spreading, admitting he is far more interested in having a cold glass of beer. With a heavy thud, the completely exhausted Rudiger collapses onto the grass, weakly asking Vlad if he is going to help him up. Sitting side by side on the hill, Vlad laughs and replies that he would rather choose to fall over and rest as well. Rudiger smiles and praises Vlad's exceptional riding skills, noting that the boy easily disproved all the negative rumors. Vlad humbly deflects the compliment, pointing out that the credit belongs entirely to his remarkable spiritual horse. The rest of the cavalry squad gathers around, laughing and praising the young kid for being strong enough to bust open their vassals. The veteran soldiers bid Vlad a warm farewell, commanding him to keep up the good work so they can meet again on the battlefield. Vlad politely offers his thanks, only to gasp in surprise as Priest Andreas steps forward from the group of pilgrims. Looking at the boy with profound gratitude, the old priest expresses his relief that Vlad is safe, noting that he recognized the brilliant light of the spirit's blessing from a distance. The priest reflects on how Vlad's pure light pierced through the pitch-black darkness to deliver them from doom. He clasps Vlad's hands and offers his deepest thanks, naming the young vassal as the true savior of his flock. The pilgrims look on in reverence, deeply moved by the selfless boy who acted solely on his pure will to protect others. Kneeling on the grass, Priest Andreas offers a solemn prayer, asking the gods to comfort and bless this shining, brave young warrior with infinite compassion. As the crowd watches in silent awe, Vlad feels his internal world expand, having successfully united countless hearts under a single, brilliant light. Under a warm, bright sky, a fantasy cityscape of spires and towering buildings stretches out, while a pair of hands tightly grips a newly arrived message. Count Bayezid stands in a grand, sunlit hall and demands to know if the shocking report is absolutely correct. The messenger confirms the news, explaining that Dorothea sent this urgent update directly through her crystal ball. A sudden crush of anger fills the room as they realize dark magic is at play once again, and some of the cursed entities have settled in the north. Because the Empire has been too lax, ancient cursed beings are slowly rising from the shadows, though powerful warriors are already stepping up to drive them back. Despite the dark news, the mood shifts as the men discuss a relieving rumor that has been constantly circulating. The rumors all trace back to the same person, highlighting his deeds from last year's winter monster hunt to the legendary duel of honor at Hainal. Now, this remarkable young warrior has even involved himself in the matter of the pilgrims, saving Bayezid from what could have been a massive disgrace. A flash of blue energy erupts from a swinging sword as the young man carves through his foes, presenting an admirable figure of strength. Count Bayezid looks on in deep contemplation and immediately commands his subordinates to call Joseph to his presence. He firmly believes that those who prove their worth deserve to enjoy the full rights they have earned. As night falls, a camp quiet is shattered by a sudden booming impact, while a lone figure sits quietly by a crackling campfire. A gentle rustling sound breaks the silence of the dark fields as a pair of hands rests calmly on a cold metallic surface. A blonde warrior looks over and asks Vlad why he is acting so pitiful and keeping to himself after going through so much. Vlad looks up and asks Rudiger about the whereabouts of their companions, Fatty and Priest Andreas. Rudiger mentions that everyone is incredibly busy, prompting a quiet sigh from Vlad as he looks out into the night. Rudiger holds out a drink and offers Vlad a sip, but the young warrior immediately turns it down with a serious stare. Rudiger laughs and notes that Vlad always says no, rejecting his peanuts, his liquor, and even his hand whenever he offers help to get up. Rudiger asks if Joseph was the one who instructed Vlad to keep such a strict distance, causing Vlad to stammer out a quick denial. Holding up the bottle, Rudiger reveals it is premium whiskey, calling it the luxury liquor of the nobility. As the two sit together, Rudiger muses on how much Vlad and his brother resemble each other, while a dark shadow looms nearby. Rudiger warns Vlad that he needs to get his sword inspected the moment they return from their journey. Vlad looks puzzled, but Rudiger explains that the connection between the hilt and the blade is dangerously unstable. Unless Vlad can track down the original blacksmith who forged it, the entire hilt needs to be completely disassembled because the weapon is just as reckless as its owner. Vlad takes a long swig from his bottle and admits that is precisely why he refused to let anyone touch it. He looks on with intense determination, explaining that he refuses to lose the memories and the weight this blade holds. A bright, magical light flares along the edge of the heavy sword as Vlad resolves to protect everything sealed within it. His companion stares back silently, gently insisting that even with those feelings, Vlad has to fix the weapon because it looks incredibly dodgy right now. Vlad agrees, whispering that his only option is to track down the creator, prompting his friend to ask where this mysterious blacksmith is located. With absolute certainty, Vlad reveals the creator is in the shining city of Sawara. The legendary title of Vlad of Sawara echoes in the dark, and Vlad smiles with a confident, sharp expression. He stood as the brightest star on the battlefield today, swinging his blade in a ferocious downward arc that cuts the air with a loud swish. A pair of striking blue eyes widens in realization as a warrior finally understands the truth. He realizes this was the exact reason his younger brother was constantly running around while the world was engulfed by the crimson tide of chaos. A soft voice assures him that if he hopes desperately enough, someone will eventually acknowledge his hard work and dedication. Vlad looks ahead with determination, while his blonde companion blinks in surprise at the sudden, warm encouragement. Resting his hands on his knees, Vlad gently tells his friend that he has done an incredible job surviving and living well up to this point. Standing tall, Vlad bids him to get some early sleep as the orange light of dawn begins to paint the horizon. As Vlad walks off into the open field, his friend looks on and finds strength in those words, believing that one day, everything will change. He holds his glowing, damaged sword close, promising himself that he will definitely find a way to repair it because they finally have a place to return to. A lone warrior prepares his blade against a vast, dark coastline, remembering when the world was still filled with wonder and magic. A pair of boots steps firmly onto the grassy slope, looking down toward a camp where a lone white-haired man sits peacefully by a fire. A pair of intense blue eyes stares out into the starry night, where a massive, mystical horse with glowing blue accents stands proud in the grassy plains. The majestic beast remains still under the starlight, just outside a massive, classical estate illuminated by the night. Inside the warm, candlelit room, a delicate tool is used to trace a glowing circular emblem. A blonde youth stands in the grand hall and asks if the finished work looks sufficient. He asks the countess if the design matches the Heinel family crest, and she confirms it is identical to the ancient drawings in their books. She asks if she should begin preparing the next crest, and a dark-haired man steps forward to observe. The young man politely declines, stating there is no need to show it to him, before changing the subject. He asks if the fading history makes the symbol even more precious, and his companion grins back with a smug, knowing look. He agrees, noting that this tradition has been largely forgotten by the modern era. He scoffs that the pampered knights of today are completely unworthy of lifting such a sacred flag, a banner meant to belong solely to a true master. Under a clear blue sky, a powerful group of armored riders charges forward in perfect formation. A scout marvels at the incredible sight of a herd of wild horses and human riders running together in complete harmony. His commander agrees. It is a rare phenomenon, noting it might very well be the first and last time they ever witnessed such a bond. Despite their incredibly brief encounter, the horses and the humans have clearly forged a connection that makes them irreplaceable to one another. A blonde warrior watches the herd run across the grassy hills and quietly accepts that it is finally time to part ways. He leaps into action, calling out that just as he has a grand purpose to fulfill, the leading beast has a duty to guide its own herd. The magnificent lead stallion rears back, and runs freely across the green hills as a farewell. A heavy carriage rolls down the dirt road, carrying travelers who look back toward the fields, knowing they can only travel together this far. A youth looks out of the carriage door into the bright dawn, bidding a quiet farewell to his companion who stands nearby. The youth tries to act indifferent, prompting a hearty laugh from an older traveler, who remarks on how difficult it is for humans to speak their true feelings. The elderly man gently explains that human lives are simply a continuous cycle of hellos and goodbyes, bringing both tears and sudden happiness. He smiles warmly, noting that the depth of a connection is never truly decided by how much time people spend together. The massive horse stands proud against the morning sun as a smiling young warrior whispers that they will definitely meet again. With a final look across the sunlit fields, the travelers turn away to continue their journey. The stallion gallops away as a heavy rain begins to pour over the distant towering estate. Inside a dark chamber, a nobleman reacts with shock to the sudden grim news of Count Ravnoma's downfall. A messenger explains that the activity in the west has been highly irregular, and no one expected Count Gaidar's house to possess such terrifying strength. The houses of the west formed a massive alliance with Gaidar at the center, leaving the defenders completely outnumbered and unable to fight back. The nobleman demands to know why the royal family failed to intervene, before standing up in silence to process the shifting tides of power. Because the West built an unshakable wall, it remained completely free from the influence and authority of the central crown. The Lord mutters in disbelief that a ruling count's family could collapse so easily, staring out of the window in deep thought. This was no ordinary noble house. They were a sacred guardian of the pact, whose legacy has now been violently shattered. The ancient rules and traditions have become entirely meaningless because of these ambitious new holders of power. As the rain pours outside, the Lord declares these to be turbulent times, while his advisor warns that the empire must draw a line to stop this chaos. A warrior stares down from a high balcony at the gathering crowds below, realizing the grim reality of the family's fall. He curses under his breath, realizing the newcomers are not simple pilgrims, but heavily armed refugees from Ravnoma seeking protection under the old pact. A group of travelers gathers in a desolate clearing, where a young blonde warrior clutches his head in absolute distress. He paces through the high stone arches of the grand hall, terrified of how furious Mr. Joseph will be when he finds out what has happened. A voice calls him a brainless brat, before a door swings open to reveal a blonde youth standing at the threshold. A dark-cloaked man notes that the youth returned a full day early, and a blue-haired warrior stands nearby with a highly serious expression. The blonde youth reassures his superiors that he is completely fine and promises to carry out his duties exactly as commanded. The blue-haired man watches him walk away, noting that while the boy acts completely normal on the surface, he is actually raging like a wildfire underneath. Realizing he's in massive trouble, the youth walks past a blazing hearth while his mind drifts to the name of Sawara. A warrior stands in a dimly lit alleyway and admits he knows absolutely nothing about the dangerous backstreets of that city. He remembers hearing that conflicts in the slums only end when an entire gang is completely wiped out or forced to surrender. When asked why he is suddenly bringing this up, the dark-haired warrior asks if it is true that the youth cannot even send a simple letter to his lover in the Covenant. A fierce warrior stands firm against the crimson tide of mana, while the youth stubbornly insists that the woman is just a close friend. The dark-haired man looks on intensely as the youth explains he is simply holding back from sending letters to keep the people in Sawara safe from harm. He admits that resolving this dangerous situation will require a massive amount of time, effort, and strategy. A serious commander reflects on the incredible value of a broker named One-Eyed Jack, who holds immense sway in the criminal underworld. The wealthy broker has used his vast fortunes to build powerful connections with the most dangerous figures in Sawara. The commander looks at the youth and promises to repay him fully for all the incredible struggles he endured on their behalf. The youth blinks in utter disbelief, while his lord smiles and mentions an object that most people could never hope to possess in a lifetime. He praises the young warrior for gladly grabbing hold of his destiny with both of his hands. He declares that the youth is highly worthy of carrying his very own flag, and the Bayezid family will fully guarantee his noble standing. True to his word, the Lord presents a magnificent crest, officially declaring the young warrior Vlad as a true vassal of the Bayezid family. Vlad is commanded to raise his head with pride under his new banner, as two warriors face each other in a quiet, tense standoff. His lord tells him to go and violently slash through the worthless people who are keeping him bound in chains. The lord bids Vlad to find his true freedom and return to him as the young warrior looks ahead with absolute focus. A bearded man stands proud as the official token of identity is verified by a priest, confirming the boy's newfound authority. A handsome warrior looks on with determination, knowing that the family crest on his new flag represents a massive milestone. Every single one of these grand honors will serve as the foundation of the boy's roots and the proof of his incredible accomplishments. As the crimson tide of mana looms over the world, Vlad kneels before his lord and promises to execute his commands without fail. With a fierce, aggressive snarl, the warrior prepares for action, while two robed figures stand inside a colossal, ornate hall. The ancient ruins of a mystical landscape stretch out as the travelers gaze upon a legendary artifact. A dark-haired warrior stands in a powerful stance, recognizing the object as the undeniable proof of the sacred pact. A massive magical impact rocks the area as a robed elder reveals that the artifact holds a fragment of the prime dragon of perfection. A colossal, terrifying dragon roars in fury, recalling the legendary battle where the founding king brought the massive beast down. An elderly, distinguished gentleman strokes his mustache in deep thought before offering a polite apology. A nobleman sighs, noting that Count Ravnoma's family was the absolute only house in the entire West capable of protecting the pact. The Lord sits on his ornate throne and offers his own elite knights to help transport the proof of the pact as safely as possible. He graciously invites his guests to rest comfortably within his estate while the heavy preparations are finalized. A lone warrior paces down a long marble hallway, looking ahead with a deeply serious and intense expression. The robed elder tells the Count not to worry, knowing that the only Western house equal to their standing is a legendary power. They speak of the mighty ruler of the North, the Iron Duke Timur Baranov, who stands clad in heavy armor with glowing red eyes. The Count admits there is little he can do to change the situation, but the heavy weight on his shoulders remains entirely undiminished. He stops in surprise as he spots a familiar, majestic flag that he has not laid eyes on in an incredibly long time. The elder looks up at the towering banner with a nostalgic smile, deeply moved by the sight of the crest. The men discuss the legendary concept of a knight banneret, a warrior who serves as his own master while looking up at the glowing symbol. A young knight swings his blade with terrifying force, while a scarred veteran bids him to return safely to his hometown. He commands the young warrior to execute his rightful duty as they look over a sprawling, shadow-drenched medieval city. Deep within a chaotic hall, an rowdy crowd of mercenaries and thugs begins shouting impatiently for the main attraction to finally appear. The drunken patrons yell that the person with the most gold coins gets to decide who plays tonight, demanding that drinks be poured immediately. A shadowy figure stands with her back to the rowdy crowd as the name Marcella echoes loudly through the noisy tavern. A ruthless manager scoffs at the men acting like rutting pigs before turning to Marcella and reminding her that she must serve as many clients as possible to clear her massive debt. A purple-haired woman stares ahead in cold silence before a sudden sharp sound cuts through the room. She grips her weapon tightly as a mocking nobleman warns her to see just how long she can maintain her stubborn, confident act. He sneers as she will be trapped in this filthy establishment even when her body begins to rot. But Marcella simply looks up with quiet defiance. She looks down with a calm expression and politely wishes the manager a very long, prosperous life. The manager grinds her teeth in fury at the girl's unbroken spirit, before screaming at her to get dressed and get out onto the stage immediately. A hand carefully applies makeup as Marcella reflects that she has climbed to a remarkably strong position for someone forced to sell her body. Though her path is difficult, she finds solace in the fact that she chose her own destiny. She wraps her robes around herself and steps firmly through the door, ready to face the roaring crowd. The rowdy crowd cheers wildly as she emerges, while Marcella silently accepts that this is her chosen path to destruction. A pair of sinister, grinning thugs laugh maniacally in the shadows, anticipating a night of absolute debauchery. A sudden, thunderous blast shakes the tavern as a smug host steps forward and asks if the patrons have been waiting long. The host loudly challenges the crowd, demanding to see who has the gold to purchase the company of Sawara's Black Rose. The cheap mercenaries argue loudly, trying to pool their meager gold coins together to make a bid, only to get yelled at by their companions. The bidding descends into a chaotic shouting match as the host laughs, noting how incredible this fading flower is at generating massive wealth. A predatory thug grins widely and shouts a bid of 4 gold coins, confident that no one in the room can match his price. The host smiles at the decent offer, while the other patrons curse under their breath, knowing that 5 gold coins could fund months of luxury elsewhere. Just as the host prepares to close the deal, a cold, commanding voice rings out from the back of the room, bidding an astronomical 100 gold coins. The entire crowd of red-eyed thugs freezes in absolute shock, while the smug host spits out his drink in pure disbelief. The host erupts into a violent coughing fit as the rowdy tavern falls into a stunned, dead silence. A mysterious figure clad in luxurious dark travel gear stands calmly in the doorway as the floorboards creak beneath his heavy boots. A soft purple light glows around his hands as the title card marks the arrival of the sound that brought absolute destruction to her nest. A young woman looks up toward the brilliant light, while a dark-haired warrior stands in a powerful stance as the world is consumed by the crimson tide of mana. The terrified host stammers out a question, begging to know if the stranger actually just offered 100 gold coins. The patrons whisper in fear, noting that the stranger's aura is incredibly intense and his clothing is far too luxurious to be a bluff. The host quickly tries to present a menu, but the mysterious warrior holds up a hand and coldly states there is absolutely no need. He calmly lists his order, demanding grilled sausage, black pudding, a hash brown, and white wheat bread. He pulls back his dark hood to reveal his face, quietly adding that he will have Jorge's usual order. Marcella gasps in pure shock, covering her mouth as she realizes this gold did not come from a place of filthy desire. She remembers the pure colors of her past, weeping as the young warrior smiles and gently announces that he has finally returned. A powerful blonde warrior prepares for combat as Marcella stands frozen, tears of pure relief streaming down her pale cheeks. Vlad looks ahead with a confident, sharp grin, while Marcella desperately whispers for him to turn around and escape before it is too late. She warns him that one-armed Jack's most dangerous subordinates are currently running this entire district. The thugs look between the two in confusion before a high-ranking enforcer steps forward to end this unexpected interference immediately. A massive silver-haired warrior draws his weapon as Vlad steps forward to meet the hostile gang members. With a cold, piercing glare, Vlad announces that before he pays a single coin, he has a very personal score to settle. The enforcer demands to know what kind of exchange he is talking about as he raises his heavy blade. The name of one-armed Jack echoes through the hall as a scarred, older fighter stares back with an expression of pure malice. Vlad prepares his stance, resolving that there is an invaluable item he must violently wrench from the gang leader's hands. The enforcer laughs at the young warrior's absolute lunacy, cursing him for daring to speak their boss's name so lightly. Vlad leaps forward like a flash of lightning, initiating a brutal clash of steel that sends powerful shockwaves through the tavern. The first guard is instantly sent flying, spitting blood and screaming in agony as Vlad's blade carves a devastating arc. With perfect, rapid-fire mechanics, Vlad spins through the defensive line, parrying a heavy strike and delivering a crushing counter. The sound of tearing wind fills the room as a massive slash sends the remaining thugs crashing hard into the stone pillars. Vlad stands over the fallen fighters with a blood-dripping sword, coldly commanding them to shut their mouths and stay exactly where they are. He looks up toward the stage, declaring that simply defeating these low-level thugs is far from enough. As the remaining guards tremble in fear, the lead enforcers raise their weapons and demand to know who sent him. Vlad tightly grips the hilt of his heavy blade with both hands, looking them dead in the eye and proudly declaring that he is Jorge's last dagger. Vlad assumes a fierce fighting stance, prompting the shocked thugs to suddenly remember who he is. They scream out his name in sheer disbelief, wondering how a kid they thought had died is standing right in front of them. The gang quickly realizes they just hit the jackpot, boasting that bringing his head to the boss will earn them a fortune in gold coins. With a sudden surge of movement, they charge forward, recalling how they previously tried to slaughter him on that fateful day. A deafening roar echoes as the thugs brace themselves, only to freeze in pure horror at the sheer force erupting around Vlad. They tremble as they witness his overwhelming power, realizing this beast of a warrior is nothing like the weak child they once knew. Vlad watches them freeze and mockingly tells them that if they are just going to stand there, he will gladly bring the fight directly to them. With a thunderous burst of speed, Vlad closes the distance to carve through their front line. He unleashes a blinding flurry of strikes, his blades slicing through armor and scattering bodies like leaves in a storm. The dark hall is illuminated by glowing magical energy as Vlad drives his sword straight into another opponent. Spattered with fresh blood, Vlad coldly vows that he will not let a single one of these monsters make it out of the room alive. He lunges forward to strike down the next wave, determined to make them pay in blood for every single tear. Marcella cried. The heavy thud of a dropped sword echoes over the broken bodies of his enemies. A bruised thug gasps out Jorge's name, recalling how the back alleys of Sawara fell entirely into their gang's hands during Vlad's long absence. He boasts about standing atop a mountain of his enemies' corpses and stealing what belonged to others to climb higher in the criminal underworld. Yet, he bitterly realizes that a life spent scraping in the back alleys ultimately lies in the hands of the high nobility. Staring at his bloodied hands, the thug curses this wretched life and the fate that awaits him. He reflects that, even though Jorge was the true victor, he was still the one who died because a few words from a high lord can end any commoner's life in an instant. The gang's brooding is cut short by a panicked scout who screams that they are completely surrounded. The scout pants in terror, reporting that armed soldiers are swarming the streets and blocking every single back door of the alley. The gang reacts in disbelief, demanding to know why the garrison is mobilizing when their hefty monthly bribes were paid well in advance. They desperately try to convince themselves it must be a routine patrol, but deep down, they know their reckoning has arrived. Gripping his sword hilt, a senior enforcer smiles a wicked, toothy grin and welcomes the sudden clash, finding relief in finally facing his fate today. Vlad stands over a pile of defeated guards, his eyes glowing with cold, vengeful energy as he prepares to breach the inner sanctum. Outside, disciplined ranks of armored soldiers march down the wet cobblestone streets as a commander receives word that the blockade is fully complete. Sir Vorden demands to know if every escape route has been secured, leaving the cornered local officers sweating with no room for excuses. A corrupt official stammers out a weak apology, terrified of how the High Count managed to discover their operations. Sir Vorden clears his throat and steps forward, demanding to know who allowed this rot to fester so deeply. He points directly at the corrupt mayor, calling him a cancer who condoned this criminal empire in exchange for massive chests of gold bribes. The smug official squirmingly asks when the elite knights personally deployed by the House of Bayezid will arrive to clean up the mess. He watches in sheer confusion as a single, cloaked figure steps through the wet puddles toward the entrance, prompting him to ask if they really only sent one warrior. Sir Vorden firmly reassures him that a single knight is more than enough because the legendary Joseph poured his very heart and soul into preparing this operation. This raid will serve as Vlad's official debut fight under his new lord, and he walks down the dark, narrow passage with absolute resolve. The nervous mayor begs Vlad to take some soldiers along for backup, warning him that over 50 hardened thugs are waiting inside. Vlad quietly declines the offer, while Vorden steps forward to fulfill a vital promise. With intense eyes, Vlad reminds Vorden of his promise to present his new banner in front of everyone. Vorden steps forward and tells Vlad to begin, handing over the heavy staff as the young warrior takes a deep breath. With a thunderous boom, a massive white flag unravels in the wind, and Vlad holds his sword high before the stunned crowd. The watching soldiers whisper in awe, wondering how a warrior so young could have received such a prestigious personal banner directly from House Bayezid. Vlad stares ahead with a sharp, piercing gaze, declaring to the entire alleyway that this land is now his rightful domain. He unfurls the flag, featuring the majestic twin crests of his house, warning the criminals that their very lives are now forfeit. Vlad grips his hilt as a herald steps forward, shouting a booming challenge to one-armed Jack and his back alley scoundrels. The herald proclaims that the syndicate has unlawfully disobeyed the rules of House Bayezid, and that Peter Bayezid himself has sent a rightful proxy to end their wickedness. Vlad draws his sword in a swift, roaring arc as the herald demands that one-armed Jack immediately open his doors to the proxy. The surrounding crowd erupts into roaring cheers for the House of Bayezid, their voices echoing through the dark city streets. Armed with absolute legal justification and the support of the common people, Vlad prepares to breach the fortress as Vorden wishes him luck. Vlad whispers his thanks, drawing the trail of glowing magical energy from his blade as he enters the dark, imposing syndicate building. Blood splatters across his armor as he takes the initiative, ready to face a relentless, multi-directional onslaught. Unlike any battle he has experienced before, he unleashes a torrential shockwave of magic, wondering if things would have been different if he had taken action sooner. He parries 2 incoming strikes, haunted by the endless questions of what might have happened to Jorge if they had acted before now. Shaking off his doubts, Vlad realizes there is only one true solution. He must violently put an end to one-armed Jack. He spins into a blinding storm of slashes, his glowing blade sundering the weapons and defensive lines of the elite guards. The air is filled with agonized screams as Vlad carves a path of absolute destruction through the main hall. Gripping his blood-slicked hilt with both hands, he resolves to completely sever this messy connection and let his world consume theirs. He takes heavy, measured strides toward the inner chamber to finally claim his true freedom. Standing before the cowering survivors, Vlad proudly declares his name and his role as their rightful avenger. He steps into the grand chamber to end this long feud, coming face to face with the imposing figure of the syndicate leader. He raises his glowing blade and loudly declares his return, while the massive boss sits calmly under a spotlight in the center of the dark hall. Jack looks up, instantly recognizing the voice and letting out a menacing, low chuckle at the young avenger. With a wicked sneer, Jack welcomes the rising star, mocking him for acting as the noble proxy sent to claim his head. The final clash erupts in an explosion of steel as Vlad parries a heavy overhead swing and immediately counters with a lightning-fast thrust. The elite guards gasp in sheer shock as Vlad easily repels their combined assault, his movements entirely fluid and precise. A guard screams, a desperate battle cry, but Vlad deflects the blow, leaving fresh blood splattered across the cold floor. Terrified by his inhuman skill, the thugs scream for everyone to surround him and pounce all at once. Vlad easily slices through another attacker, prompting the remaining guards to panic and hesitate to step forward. Observing Vlad's unmatched swordsmanship, the thugs desperately plead for someone else to take the lead. Vlad tells them there is no need to think so hard, declaring he will slice them all to pieces anyway as he unleashes a devastating wave of energy. He slams his blade downward, the massive shockwave blowing back the defensive line and shattering the stone floor. The guards scream in agony as Vlad continues his unrelenting, rapid-fire onslaught through the collapsing hall. With bodies piling up on the wet floor, a panicked commander screams for his men to throw their heavy iron fishnets to restrain him. The thugs desperately throw everything they have to block Vlad, completely overwhelmed by his terrifying speed. A scout spots Vlad slipping behind a massive stone pillar and urgently screams for the upper floor to block the stairs. The archers on the balcony prepare a volley of throwing blades, while Vlad quietly scoffs at how incredibly annoying they are. The lead guard mockingly challenges him to come out, while Vlad calmly assesses the thick, heavy ropes hanging nearby. Vlad slices a heavy rope with a single slash, triggering a massive collapse of the heavy stage curtains. Before the thugs can process the trap, Vlad uses the swinging rope to launch himself high into the air. He lands gracefully on the upper balcony, asking the terrified archers if these weaklings were truly the best they had to offer. With a single fluid spin of his sword, he cuts down the entire ranged squad, leaving them gasping in pain. Reflecting on the sharpness of his blade, Vlad recalls his intense training, knowing his master's wooden sword was far more dangerous than any steel. He charges through the smoke with absolute focus, parrying a desperate spear thrust with effortless precision. An archer frantically commands his men to keep shooting to keep Vlad from descending the stairs, but Vlad easily deflects their arrows. He leaps from the balcony, a single downward slash, tearing through the defenders guarding the landing. Vlad lands in the lower courtyard, his breathing calm as he prepares to finish the final defenders. He points his blood-stained blade toward the remaining guards, his eyes burning with absolute determination. The terrified survivors curse in despair as Vlad walks past them, sighing at how much of a hassle they turned out to be. Standing on the grand platform, Vlad mockingly asks one-armed Jack if he should walk down to him, or if the boss wants to climb up and meet his end. Vlad declares he is here to collect the heavy price for their unlawful stay in his home. He notes that the syndicate made a fatal misjudgment in treating this territory as their own. With a brilliant burst of magical energy, Vlad officially reclaims his nest as his intense eyes lock onto his final target. Meanwhile, at the busy port docks, a local merchant covers his face in deep despair, complaining about the lawlessness of the market. He laments that one-armed Jack became a completely heartless tyrant after Jorge's death, driving the entire back alley economy to absolute ruin. He worries about how to report the massive loss of contraband when a runner suddenly bursts in shouting that forces have blockaded the district to capture one-armed Jack. A young merchant listens in stunned silence as the runner explains that the entire garrison has surrounded the syndicate. He worries that if Jack falls, a massive turf war will rain blood over the back alleys before his associate suddenly mentions Vlad's name. The merchant demands to know why he's bringing up that name, and his companion reveals that a legendary warrior calling himself Vlad of Sawara has returned. He gasps in utter disbelief as his friend confirms that this legendary warrior just planted his flag in front of Rosa's smiles. He recalls the legendary rumors of Vlad's incredible feats, from manifesting his aura in a duel of honor to slaying a massive deathworm. Determined to witness this legendary return with his own eyes, the merchant grabs his staff and rushes out into the night. Back inside the crumbling fortress, Vlad moves like a swift phantom, parrying desperate blows and sending his enemies crashing into the stone walls. An elite guard screams in fury as Vlad effortlessly deflects his heavy blade and delivers a decisive counterstrike. With bodies piling up around him, Vlad executes a spectacular mid-air spin that unleashes a torrent of sharp, magical energy. He lands gracefully amidst the bloody debris, his sharp gaze locking onto the next target as a blinding light flares around his blade. Watching from the shadows, an observer stands completely speechless, noting that Vlad possesses the frightening, raw talent of a natural slaughterer. Vlad parries a desperate strike and coldly tells the last standing guard that he won't be needing his teeth anymore. He delivers a final, bone-crushing slash, his blade dripping with fresh blood as the guard collapses to the floor. Vlad exhales softly and sheaths his sword, declaring that this long slaughter is finally enough. Staring down at his reflection, he resolves to put a definitive end to this legacy of pain. His heavy boots echo through the quiet stone passage as he finally steps into the inner chamber, declaring his arrival. 1. Armed Jack turns around slowly, welcoming the rising star with a dark, mocking grin. Jack calmly offers him a drink to settle their differences, but Vlad flatly refuses, drawing his massive sword with absolute resolve. Jack chuckles and calls him no fun, admitting he initially dismissed the rumors of the boy's return as pure fabrication. Looking down at his hand, Jack prepares to unleash his own power as the final battle for the back alleys begins. Vlad prepares himself for the grim task ahead as the final street purge begins. He realizes he should have brought his targets in much earlier, even as threats are thrown back at him from the shadows. Hesitation flickers for a brief second before Vlad's expression hardens with absolute lethal intent. The thugs realize their allies are already dead, acknowledging the monster they are trapped with. The lawless slums are thrown into absolute chaos as one. Armed Jack steps forward, holding his blade and mocking the young warrior. Jack draws his heavy sword, declaring that he is a man who likes to make absolutely certain his targets stay down. Steel clashes violently in the dim light as Vlad lunges forward, matching the tyrant blow for blow with intense fury. This corrupt world is actively trying to consume everything Vlad holds dear, and he refuses to let it. Looking down at the blood-stained pavement, Vlad notes that the overwhelming reverence he once felt for these old slum titans has completely vanished. Vlad realizes this suffocating environment is no longer capable of holding his growing power, stepping into his stance with explosive speed. The ground shatters as Vlad warns his enemies that his final strike is coming, his blade reflecting a cold, lethal light. Jack accepts the challenge with a sinister smirk, even though he knows he is facing a force akin to a natural disaster. Shockwaves rip through the alleyway as Vlad throws himself into the meat grinder, his blade tearing through the air. Vlad unleashes a whirlwind of steel, cutting a bloody swath through anyone foolish enough to stand in his path. His eyes lock onto his true target, vowing to give his fallen mentor the utmost respect by obliterating his killers one last time. The remaining thugs growl in desperation, cornered like beasts as the pressure in the alley reaches a boiling point. Vlad grips his hilt with crushing force, channeling raw, devastating momentum into his next swing. The air screams as a massive explosion of force shatters the surrounding stone structures, scattering lethal debris everywhere. Jack groans under the immense pressure, his defenses buckling against Vlad's terrifying strength. The chaotic battlefield fades into a blur as Vlad pushes his body past its absolute limits to end the regime of the slums. Another thunderous impact rattles the street, splashing thick crimson across the ruined ground as bodies fall. Vlad drives forward through the smoke, his cloak billowing as his blade seeks the throat of the slum tyrant. With an intense glare, Vlad delivers the brutal, boundless style of respect native to the back alleys, drowning the area in a storm of slashes. Blades collide with a deafening screech, forcing a pained grunt from Vlad's throat as the intense duel reaches its climax. Jack roars in fury, swinging his massive blade in a desperate attempt to cleave the young warrior in half. Vlad weaves through the lethal trajectory, his focus entirely locked onto the tyrant's openings. The young boy who once wielded nothing but a wooden sword has transformed into an unrecognizable engine of destruction. Jack recognizes the terrifying growth, shouting that Vlad had to be at least this good to dare step foot back in this hellhole. Vlad's sharp gaze cuts through the dust, his movements fluid and unyielding as he presses the advantage. Jack reflects on his old dreams of seizing the shining stars of wealth and power at any cost in this dark city. He clenched his fists tightly in the past because strength was the only currency that mattered in the slums. The brutal reality of the back alleys meant there was never any boundary between good and evil, only survivors and the dead. By shedding rivers of blood, Jack had eventually climbed to the absolute peak of this lawless underworld. Yet, looking up at the distant spires, he realizes he could never get close to touching the true heights of the world. Even if those dreams were now completely covered in blood and greed, they were still his very own stars to chase. Amidst the raging fires of combat, the old boss grips his weapon for one final, desperate stand. Energy crackles through the air as Jack pours the remainder of his life force into his muscular frame. Vlad responds with a blinding display of cosmic blade techniques, forcing Jack to realize his own shortcomings. To truly grab what shines, Vlad steps forward with absolute certainty and zero hesitation. Vlad unleashes a massive crescent of blue energy, completely overwhelming Jack's guard and shattering his weapon. Vlad declares that to reach the stars, he had to become worthy of shining brightly all on his own. The final impact throws Jack to the ground, a heavy groan escaping his lips as his reign comes to a violent end. Emerging from the smoke, Vlad stands over his bleeding, beaten opponent with cold, unblinking eyes. Jack lets out a maniacal, wheezing laugh as blood drips from his mouth, entirely amused by his own defeat. He mockingly hopes that Jorge is watching this from the afterlife, smiling menacingly despite his fatal wounds. Vlad tells the tyrant to shut the hell up, lunging forward to deliver the final strike amidst a shower of sparks. With a gaze colder than ice, Vlad tells him he does not deserve forgiveness for devouring the smiles of innocent people. Vlad roars that death is the only fitting end for the bastard who sold Marcella off like property. Jack laughs hysterically at the accusation, completely unbothered by his incoming miserable demise. He shouts that it is a happy day, reveling in the chaos and violence that defined his entire existence. Jack coughs up blood, yelling that the back alley should crack open all the rum barrels for a massive party. As Vlad's blade drives home, Jack gasps out his final prediction that the young boy will climb much higher than he ever could. Vlad screams at the dying man to shut his mouth, refusing to hear any praise from a monster. The tyrant's body slumps into the dirt, the dark energy fading from the alleyway as the battle concludes. Vlad takes a heavy, exhausted breath, leaning against his sword as the adrenaline finally begins to drain away. He sheathes his blood-stained weapon, the quiet metallic click echoing through the corpses of 50 henchmen. Looking down at the destruction, Vlad mutters that this bloody outcome might actually be for the best. Rather than being slowly crushed to death by a massive world like Jorge was, Jack met a warrior's end. Getting trampled to death by a young rising world trying to climb higher was a far better fate for a slum boss. Vlad wipes the fresh blood from his cheek, his expression remaining completely serious and unreadable. A sinister voice tells the resting warrior that he did a great job and should take a rest before leaving. Vlad snaps his head around in surprise as a sharp, sudden pain flares through his overtaxed body. His boots drag heavily across the wooden floorboards as he demands that whoever is blocking his path moves out of the way. Clutching his heavily bleeding chest, Vlad stands tall before the remaining survivors, stating that the slaughter is finally enough. He acknowledges that he has lived a brutal, evil life filled with violence to reach this point. Even though he has been miserably overpowered and crushed by a shining world at the very end, he regrets nothing. Vlad grits his teeth against the agonizing strain, muttering that he did a good enough job out there. He grins through the pain, shouting out Jorge's name and declaring that he had an absolutely great time. His boots leave bloody footprints on the floor, his face covered in deep cuts and dark bruising as he stumbles forward. Vlad's intense gaze locks onto the exit, his body threatening to collapse under the sheer weight of his injuries. He walks out of the ruined, blood-soaked compound, leaving the corpses of Jack's empire behind him in the dark hallway. Vlad steps out into the cool night air, accepting the brutal reality that the purge of the slums was only natural. Yet, looking down at his notched, grime-covered blade, a lingering bitterness fills his mouth. He glances down at his tattered garments, his eyes sharp despite the exhaustion dragging him down. Vlad walks heavily through the shallow, blood-tinted puddles outside, each step a monument to his survival. He looks at his trembling, bloodied hand, his shadow stretching long against the stone walls of the alley. Letting out a long, heavy sigh, Vlad stands in the center of the quiet, debris-strewn street. The echo of Jack's final words about climbing higher rings through his mind as he grips his weapon. With a serious expression, a blood-covered hand reaches out across the darkness to return a final token. Standing on the elevated platform, Vlad tells his boss to take this back because a true knight only takes what he earned. He looks into the dim room where a stained glass and a single gold coin rest on the table, symbolizing the end of the contract. The narrative notes that the slums are a place where transient people stagnate like old water before moving on. Vlad's striking blue eyes look down as a stagnant drop of water finally flows outside of this cruel world. This violent night leaves a permanent ripple in the young boy's world as he disappears down the foggy alleyway. The next morning, Sir Vorden stands outside the ruined building, noting that the area is ominously silent. Heavy footsteps echo through the corridor as the investigation team slowly moves inward. Vorden spots a figure in the distance, his breath catching in his throat as he realizes what lies ahead. A blonde knight stands in shock before a massive pool of blood, asking if all of this carnage was caused by one person. He realizes the terrifying truth that Vlad actually took down over 50 heavily armed men entirely on his own. Vorden stares at the carnage, admitting that this impossible feat goes way beyond mere respect. The investigation team moves through the cavernous hall, completely overwhelmed by the scale of the massacre. They find Vlad from behind, his clothes entirely ruined and soaked through with the blood of his enemies. Vorden orders his men to stand down as Vlad slowly turns his head, his gaze intensely focused and determined. A loud shout echoes through the foggy street, breaking the heavy silence of the slums. Harvin runs forward, his hand tightly gripping his hilt as he spots his old friend standing among the bodies. He yells out Vlad's name to announce his presence, causing the exhausted warrior to blink in realization. The investigation team watches intently as Vlad's sharp blue eyes lock onto the familiar voice. Vlad mutters Harvin's name, his serious expression softening slightly as he recognizes a friendly face. Vorden notes that Vlad clearly knows the newcomer, watching as the two step closer on the wooden floor. Harvin looks directly at his heavily battered friend, anxiously asking if he is actually okay after such a fight. Vlad stands firmly despite his wounds, confirming that it really is Harvin who came to find him. He looks down at the crossed swords on the ground, swearing softly under his breath as the pain catches up to him. Vlad stumbles into Harvin's arms, groaning that it hurts absolutely everywhere, as his friend catches him in shock. Looking down with a weary smile, Vlad whispers that it finally feels like he has truly returned home. Harvin holds the unconscious warrior steady, facing the guards as the long night finally comes to an end. Bright sunlight bathes the massive city of Sawara the following afternoon, far away from the dark alleys. Vlad stands on an elevated rooftop terrace, wondering if the beautiful view feels different because it isn't the slums. Harvin walks out to join him, calling him captain and noting that lying down must be harder since his whole body aches. Harvin brings a wooden basin of fresh water for Vlad to wash up, receiving a silent, piercing stare in return. Harvin chuckles nervously, defending himself by saying, "This is just how he has always been." He mentions that Vlad's old acquaintances in Sawara are already starting to show up throughout the city. Vlad stares intently at the wooden basin, telling Harvin not to get anxious because he will take care of him as long as he does his job. Harvin asks if that is a real promise, to which Vlad intensely replies that he can do something about it if he doesn't trust him. Harvin quickly waved his hands, assuring Vlad that of course he trusts him completely. He adds that Sir Vordan wanted to see him immediately upon waking, which aligns with Vlad's own plans for a discussion. Sitting before a massive feast, Vlad mutters that he feels like he might die if he doesn't eat something immediately. Vordan gestures to a massive stack of documents, groaning that he needs to go through them all, but cannot see the end. He explains that one-armed Jack's shadow enclosed the deepest parts of the slums, which makes perfect sense given how long he dominated everything. Vordan asks Vlad what he plans to do next, since the immediate combat work in the aftermath is essentially finished. Vlad admits he doesn't know, and Vordan confirms that he is officially on standby until Mr. Joseph arrives. Vlad asks if there is something else he can help with, admitting he knows next to nothing about handling documents. Vordan passes a paper over, explaining that it represents the representative authority, which is officially the right to arrest. Mr. Joseph wants to take this golden opportunity to completely clean up the lawless back alleys. The plan is to completely uproot the criminal weeds and replace them with decent, controlled substitutes. Vordan tells Vlad he is the perfect man for the job, since he knows the slums better than anyone, suggesting he bring his girlfriend along too. Vlad firmly corrects him that she is just a friend, noting that he already applied to visit her at the convent but was told to wait. Vlad: "Thanks, Vordan," realizing the commander is much more thorough than expected, since he didn't even have to ask for the favor. Vordan mentions there is one more thing to address regarding Sir Vordan's upcoming schedule. Vlad asks if he is permitted to go there directly, because there is someone he absolutely needs to find. With a piercing glare, Vlad vows that if he doesn't find them at the convent, he will search the entire back alley piece by piece. He stands tall, clad in his dark armor, fully prepared to tear the city apart to reclaim his family. Vlad learns that Jack's remaining captured henchmen are locked in the innermost prison, thanking the guards as he passes. His large cloak swishes against the stone floor as the prisoners whisper in shock, recognizing the high-profile visitor. The inmates stare in disbelief, realizing that the powerful proxy from the Bayezid family has actually entered the cells. They anxiously wonder if he is here to track down every single person who attacked Rose's smiles that day, to exact absolute revenge. Vlad walks past the bars with a cold expression, ignoring the terrified looks of the thugs. He stops before a specific cage structure, his sharp blue eyes locking onto a dark corner. Vlad mutters that he finally found them, jokingly adding that squatting in the dark makes them hard to recognize. He looks at the figure, recalling an old transaction where he asked for 40 silvers and offered to accept credit. The memory of Otar flashes through his mind, a man who confidently smiled despite the harshness of the slums. Otar possessed dark skin that was shunned even in the filthiest corners of the back alleys. Yet, Vlad had been the very first person to ever reach out a hand to him without judgment. He was someone who hadn't lost his inner light, even while buried in the piles of trash. Vlad blinks out of the memory, his hands clasped as he prepares to move to his next destination. The scene shifts to the grand, imposing convent kitchen, where the staff is busy preparing meals. The kitchen workers look out the arched windows in excitement, shouting that the special guest has finally arrived. They gush over his handsome appearance, gossiping about his blonde hair, blue eyes, and status as the vassal of Bayezid. They wonder if the young vassal has already become a full knight, noting the massive rumors surrounding his exploits. They observe the local dignitaries trailing submissively behind him, betting that massive donations were made just to get close to his family. The head chef suddenly slams her hands down, furiously yelling at the staff to stop dawdling and get back to work. The workers quickly apologize, scrambling to finish their duties as the chef tells the redhead to hurry up. The other servants mock the girl, complaining that they all got scolded because she is taking her sweet time. Zemina quietly apologizes under her breath, her face obscured as the others tell her to finish the dishes alone. She softly agrees, left entirely alone, surrounded by massive stacks of heavy plates and cups as the others rush to the chapel. Inside the grand chapel, The priest announces that today they have a special guest from the Bayazid family. The seated crowd whispers in awe, describing the arriving warrior as if he were a legendary knight straight out of a fairy tale. Vlad walks down the center aisle, his focused gaze scanning the rows of gathered church members. He frowns heavily, noting to himself that he doesn't see her despite explicitly ordering that all the nuns be gathered. As the priest calls for everyone to bow their heads in prayer, Vlad quietly steps away from the altar. He strides deep into the back corridors of the convent, leaving the surprised whispers of the onlookers behind. Zemina hurries through the stone hallways, dropping her gaze in shock as a shadow falls over her. She kneels on the floor, panting heavily as she looks up at the grand, imposing figure standing before her. Vlad looks down at her with a serious expression, thankful that he managed to find her in the labyrinthine building. His blue eyes widen in sudden, intense fury as he takes in her disheveled and mistreated state. Vlad clicks his tongue in pure irritation, causing the accompanying church official to anxiously ask if something is wrong. Vlad turns away coldly, muttering that she is far too thin and harshly demanding to know if they even bother to feed her properly. The official flinches in terror, clasping his hands and stammering as Vlad's heavy footsteps echo through the grand pillars. Zemina blinks in complete disbelief, letting out a soft gasp as she stares at the powerful warrior. She quietly tells herself that there is absolutely no way this magnificent knight could possibly be her old friend Vlad. Vlad calls out her name, looking down at the red-haired girl who is trembling on the stone floor. The surrounding staff gasps in shock as Vlad completely ignores all religious protocols to approach her. Vlad swears under his breath, kneeling down directly in front of her tattered robes with a fierce intensity. He demands to know what happened to her, angrily asking if the convent caretakers are completely incompetent idiots. Zemina looks at his intense, determined face, completely overwhelmed by his sudden presence. Vlad reaches out a gentle hand, softly brushing her hair aside to check for any hidden injuries. He gently commands her to answer him, causing a pained, emotional expression to cross her face as tears well up. Standing back up, Vlad declares that they are completely screwing the damn procedures and leaving this place immediately. He looks directly into her eyes, firmly stating the words she never expected to hear. "Let's go home, Zemina." The girl who had spent her entire life as a homeless vagrant looks up in absolute shock, having never experienced parental warmth or a real shelter. In the brutal, unforgiving streets of the back alleys, they had nothing but each other to lean on. Vlad stands protectively by her side as the sun shines through the windows, proving that they were always each other's true home and family. Thank you for watching Buff Goblin. Check it out in the description for more audiobooks and recaps. This video ends on chapter 42 of Star Embracing Swordmaster. Thank you for watching Buff Goblin.